on their hands and feet, which could barely stick to the vertical wall. However, there are not many such level 3 zombies, at least at this stage. Xia Yaoshe risked 1 life and 1 injury, and after getting to know the performance of this level 3 zombie, he began his second transfer. The direction of transfer was the ice and stone bridge built by Su Su and Gotzi. Xia Yaoshe asked Feifei to grow a vine thick enough to connect their side of the ice bridge with Su Su's, and they climbed up the vine one by one to the bridge. Su Su, Xie Qingyan, has also gone up the bridge. Gotzi stood at the bridge head, on the suspended platform where the glass wall had been broken, looking at the group of people standing on the bridge in the distance, then turned to look at Su Su. Su Su was pregnant with a big belly. She used a piece of cloth dipped in water to wipe Yiyu's face and body. Yiyu's face became more and more red. Today, there were some cracks on his skin due to excessive burning, which made others very worried. Hearing what Gotzi said, Su Su turned around and looked at the empty platform, at the ice bridge that was already melting with dripping water. She snorted coldly and said to Gotzi, "At a time like this, how can we afford to waste time on each other? Such a huge zombie tide is more than enough to destroy an entire base. It's good that they're coming over. More people means more help. Help me carry you on my back and we'll go up to the 10th floor." Looking at the current tide of zombies, it would not be a problem to pile up a few more meters. The 3rd and 4th floors have been completely submerged in the tide of zombies, and the 7th floor will sooner or later be reached by those jumping zombies. Su Su thought that she had to move up, and by the way, she didn't want to meet someone like Xie Qingyan, lest she accidentally chop Xie Qingyan with her belly bulging. Although she had no intention of cooperating with Xia Yaoshe and had never given Xia Yaoshe's team any goodwill in return because of Xie Qingyan, but in the current situation, she still wanted to stop Xia Yaoshe's team from saving themselves or to disrupt their path to self-rescue. It always felt like she was causing an internal conflict in the face of the zombie tide. So Su Su let them go, and Xia Yaoshe could go wherever they wanted as long as they didn't bother her. Gotzi nodded and did as Su Su said, carrying Yiyu to the 10th floor. The others packed up their equipment and supplies and followed him up. Standing in a higher place, Su Su could see farther and saw that the direction of the zombies' attack was slightly different from the previous few days. Perhaps they felt that the people in this building were too difficult to deal with, or perhaps they thought that just a few of them were not enough to fill the gaps in their teeth, so the zombies turned to the north to crawl today. What's in the north? Su Su frowned, holding up the binoculars given to her by the special forces, and stood by the window. She tilted her head and asked Gotzi. Gotzi was stunned. Before he could think of how to answer Su Su, Wandishan took out a crumpled map from his tactical vest and pointed to a place called Chuncheng in the north of Xiangqing. He said, "We are now in the center of Xiangqing. To our west is the safe zone that LV-Een once established. Now it is full of maggots. Further west is our Bafang village. Because of the maggot tide, the zombies can't get through, or can't get through easily. To the north are several gathering places of survivors of different sizes, all the way to Chuncheng, which has become the largest safe zone south of the Yangtze River. I felt like I was surrounded by enemies and being criticized by everyone. Oh, they want to go north." Su Su suddenly realized that going west, there were maggots. Even though there was Bafang village, a village with many living people, it would still be difficult for the zombies to pass. But going north was much easier. Not only was there a Dachuan city, there were also several gathering places of survivors along the way. The aura emitted by those living people was much more attractive than the mere 20 or 30 of them. The zombie tide is a major trend. No matter what level Su Su's superpowers have risen to, with her personal strength, she cannot stop or change the direction of the zombie tide. Even if she and Xia Yaoshe are together, and all the superpower users present are added together, it is impossible. The power of the zombie tide can destroy a base. It is only a matter of time to destroy their small group of people. And Su Su also understood that the reason they were still alive until now was because this zombie tide was not coming for them, but for Chuncheng. When they were still in Xiangqing, the zombie tide was so big, and it would be even bigger when it reached Chuncheng. How big a disaster would it cause? Su Su is not a saint. Even if she were, She could not stop the tide of maggots with such a big belly. All she asks now is that the few people on her side can escape from the predicament as soon as possible from the tide of zombies besieging them. It is that simple. Su, I have already explained our situation to Bafang village. It's okay. They have found a few coordinates and obtained a lot of aviation kerosene in the past few days. They will come back to pick us up tomorrow morning. We just need to wait on the roof. Seeing that Su's brows were tightly furrowed, Gotzi thought that Su was worried about the current situation, so he explained why they had been trapped for so many days and none of the other Special Forces soldiers showed up. It was because they all went to look for aviation kerosene. It is good to have rescue, but the crisis of the zombie tide will not be resolved when it reaches Chuncheng. If Chuncheng cannot resist such a large zombie tide, it will continue to spread to the surrounding areas and develop to an infinite size. Su was a little anxious because there was a maggot tide an hour's drive from here. The reason why the maggot tide had not spread was because it was controlled by the four forces of Lu Yin, Wang Zijiao and Liang, Xia Yaoshi, and Xu Xian. Moreover, maggots are easier to control than zombies after all. No matter how much a maggot is upgraded, it is still a maggot. After a zombie is upgraded, its appearance will undergo various changes. Some zombies will even have superpowers. This is the most terrifying thing. Let's not talk about what form the zombies will evolve into. Let's talk about the present first. Now, the zombie tide is so huge that the maggot tide can easily spread with the help of the zombie tide. So it turns out that the zombie tide is in front and the maggot tide is behind. It is very likely that Chuncheng will be facing a large wave of maggots after fighting desperately against the zombie tide. What makes Su most nervous is that to the west of the maggot tide is Bafang village. If the maggot tide spreads with the help of the corpse tide, it is only a matter of time before they go to Bafang village. Her Bafang village is still developing slowly. 2 or 3 people will be enough to pick us up. Tell them that we should keep the main force in Bafang village. I'm afraid the tide of maggots in that safe zone will soon be out of control. Su put down the telescope and handed it back to Gotzi. He turned away from the window with a full stomach. Li Xiaoyu, Wan Dishan, Qingmu, and Mo Weiming had already gone downstairs to kill the zombies crowded in the corridor. If the zombies in the corridor were not cleared out, the roots of the building would be easily destroyed by the zombies. Everyone took a short rest for a few hours on the 10th floor. The power-type mutant Wan Dishan came back, gave Su a bunch of crystal cores, and then took the lead to carry most of the supplies, and went to the top floor. Su and others stayed on the 10th floor to kill zombies for the time being, because if the distance was too far, and they had to remotely control their supernatural power output to fight the zombies, the output energy would be much greater, so the distance of the 10th floor was just right. At night, Xia Yaoshi and Zhang Anquan went up to the 10th floor. They originally wanted to discuss with several special forces here about jointly resisting the zombies and retreating. However, when Zhang Anquan talked to those special forces, they all had passers-by expressions and looked at Su without any ideas, as if they had no say in the matter at all. The only person who could make the decision here was Su. In a hall with many offices, Su sat behind a white desk. Behind her was a whole wall of floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside the windows, the ice bridge had almost melted. On some sections of the bridge, only a stone pier was left, standing among the crawling mountain of corpses. Xia Yaoshi frowned, wearing a black short-sleeved t-shirt and black jeans, with a dark blue bag on his back. He walked in front of Su, put the bag on his shoulder on the white desk, and said to Su, let's not talk about friendship, let's talk about crystal cores. I know you have a transport plane, and you want to take people away. You need to use crystal cores to buy a place. Then I'll tell you straight. There are 53 of us here, including Xie Qingyan. The rest of us have 10,000 crystal cores each. I'll give Xie Qingyan 100,000 crystal cores. There was an unsolvable situation between Su and Xie Qingyan, and now there was also an unsolvable situation between Xie Qingyan and Xia Yaoshi. Hearing Xia Yaoshi's words, Zhang Anquan's face showed a hint of anger. He lowered his head, clenched his fists tightly, turned his head, and looked at the tip of his left foot. And on Xia Yaoshi's face, the Besides determination, there was also a hint of helplessness, a hint of sorrow, and a hint of helplessness at being shackled by fate. Su Su silently looked at the bulging cloth bag on the table. There were at least hundreds of thousands of ordinary crystal cores in it, probably more. These were the crystal cores that Xia Yaosher's people had used to fight the zombie tide day and night in the past few days. Xia Yaosher used them to buy the positions of 53 people, including Xia Qingyan. She thought to herself, with Xia Yaosher around, she couldn't kill Xia Qingyan at this moment, so why not earn these 100,000 crystal cores? Xia Yaosher, your life is really ruined by a man called Xia Qingyan. Because Su Su's belly was too big, she would be out of breath after climbing a few flights of stairs, so she made a chair whose 4 legs could move by themselves. She slowly carried herself to the 32nd floor. Zhua Shijia, Li Xiaoyu, and Gotzi followed behind her to protect her. When Su Su and his companions reached the 32nd floor, Xia Qingyan's 53 men also came up one after another. Su Su stood in the stairwell on the top floor of the 33rd floor from the 32nd floor. Looking back, he saw Xia Qingyan with his head down, following closely behind Xia Yaosher. Da-da-da-da, the sound of the transport plane's propeller came from outside the security door. Su Su looked at the psychics scattered in the corridor one by one. They could no longer tell who was Xia Yaosher's man and who was Lu Yin's man. Perhaps after so many days, everyone had already become people in the same boat. Su Su, you can go now. Outside the security door, Wandishan opened the door and shouted to Su Su to get on the transport plane. Yi Yu and all the supplies had already been placed on the transport plane. Just as Su Su turned around, supported his waist, and prepared to step onto the last step, the building suddenly shook. What's going on? There are too many zombies. The foundation of the building has been destroyed. In the panic, someone shouted.
Andashan hurriedly walked towards Su Su while shaking, and steadied Su Su's bloated body.
He shouted to Su Su. Hurry up, I'm afraid this building won't last much longer. We'll take you away first. Then he shouted to Xia Yaosher. Xia Yaosher, our transport plane can still carry 10 more people. You decide which 10 people to take away first. Don't worry, this building won't collapse for a while. It will be enough time for us to send Su Su and the others to a safe place, and then come back to pick you up.
No.
Su Su, you can't leave me. Amid the swaying, Xia Qingyan, who had been following Xia Yaosher, suddenly seemed to go mad. He rushed to the front of the team and waved away the skinny Feifei, who was standing in the front. Feifei fell backwards and was caught by Xia Yaosher. Xia Yaosher raised his head and shouted while shaking, Xia Qingyan, come back. Brother, you love me the most, let me go first. Xia Qingyan's face was full of panic tears. He shouted without turning his head, pushing this and that, trying to squeeze to the front and squeeze next to Zhang Anquan. Zhang Anquan used his elbow to push Xia Qingyan back and cursed. Don't you know how to queue? Why are you squeezing? The building shook for only a few seconds and then stopped. In the chaos, Su Su was protected by Wandishan and entered the security door on the rooftop. When she looked back, she saw Xia Yaosher staring at Zhang Anquan in the crowded corridor. She thought, and he also knew, that he was losing the hearts of the entire team because of Xia Qingyan. Zhang Anquan knew why Xia Yaosher had been protecting Xia Qingyan's life, and the last swear word that Zhang Anquan deliberately uttered was to curse Xia's mother, who bit her tongue to commit suicide, and at the same time, he was also expressing his dissatisfaction with the matter. But Xia Yaosher said nothing. He just walked forward, raised his hand and grabbed Xia Qingyan, twisted the back of his collar as he kept struggling, turned around, and dragged Xia Qingyan downstairs. He really went downstairs without saying a word, with his back straight, carrying a certain determination and a heavy feeling that could not be shaken off. The corridor was in such chaos that no one noticed the scene, including Zhang Anquan, who was scolding Xia's mother. Nor did they notice that their captain was dragging Xia Qingyan downstairs. But when he walked past Feifei, the wooden expression on her thin face suddenly moved, and she turned around and followed Xia Yaosher. For some reason, when Su Su saw this scene, a word suddenly popped up in her mind. The hero is old. She felt that Xie Yaoshi gave her the feeling of these 4 words. Even if he had a natural and powerful lightning ability, so what? Xie Yaoshi was too sentimental and righteous, and he was also too proud. It was destined that his ambitions could not be realized, and he only sighed.
Ah!
Su turned around and stood on the rooftop with her big belly. The wind from the propeller was very strong, blowing her long hair everywhere. Su raised her hand to support her waist, which was a little overwhelmed, and got on the transport plane under the protection of everyone. She didn't mean to leave Xie Yaoshi in the zombie tide. Although Su now respected Xie Yaoshi more and more, with Xie Qingyan standing between her and Xie Yaoshi, it was impossible for her to become a member of the same group as Xie Yaoshi. So Xie Yaoshi decided to stay until the end and get on the transport plane, or simply not get on the transport plane. Su saw it, but could not and did not want to say any words of advice to him. Their transport plane looked quite small, but after putting Su and the others in it, it could still accommodate about 10 people. Since Su and the others had received Xie Yaoshi's crystal core, they would naturally not abandon the remaining 53 people regardless of whether Xie Yaoshi left or not. After the remaining people negotiated among themselves, they selected 10 people first. After the transport plane loaded the 10 people, it flew back to Bafang village. Looking at the endless blue sky outside the window, Su lowered his head and looked at the earth below. Except for the zombies besieging their building, which formed a circle and surrounded them, the rest of the zombie tide was still surging towards the north. What was the situation like in the west when you flew over? Su sat in the cabin, leaning against Li Xiaoyu, with Zhuo Shijia next to her. In front of Zhuo Shijia was the fully armed King Kong, with a small wheat beside his mouth. Hearing this, he turned his head, looked at Su and shook his head, saying, "It's still not good." Wang Zijiao and Li Ying's people broke out on the night when the corpse tide started, but for some reason they stayed at the edge of the maggot tide, and no one knew where they wanted to go. Xie Yaoshi's people were going to rescue Xie Yaoshi, but they were stuck at the intersection of the maggot tide and the corpse tide. The ones who are doing the best are Chu Xian's gang. Now Chu Xian has rushed back to rescue Xie Yaoshi's people. If we calculate it this way, Xie Yaoshi's force is now doomed to decline. Chu Xian will have at least 300 psychics in his hands, which is a very powerful force in Chuncheng. According to the number of psychics in Chu Xian's hands, plus Feng Shi's munitions, he can completely establish a safe zone on his own. No, the focus now is not on the division of power among the heroes, but the problem of the tide of corpses and maggots. How should Hapo village survive in these 2 turbulent waves? As he was thinking, they arrived at Bafang village in a short while. Su got off the transport plane and returned to her parents' arms. Before his parents could say anything, she settled Yu down and hurriedly called Brother Pai, the special forces and people with special powers, Su's father, members of the medical team, Mei Xingnan and the other women, and Gu Beitian, who was beside Qiao Si, to hold an emergency meeting. The meeting place was the villa where Su's father lived. Su explained the problems of the tide of corpses and maggots to these people, and also expressed his worry that the tide of maggots would spread in all directions. The people, who had been leisurely for a while, fell silent, and the atmosphere on the scene fell into an unusually depressing state. So the maggots in the safe zone didn't come here because they were being controlled by Lu Yin and Li Ying? Pigo's words were a little difficult to understand, and his expression was a little ugly. It felt like they had only lived a few months of peace, and now the crisis was about to come. He couldn't imagine how the people in the village, young and old, would face the tide of maggots and corpses. Run, but how? Father Su sat in the yard, fanning himself with a large palm leaf fan. After thinking for a while, he said to Su, "Now the wall is 2/3 built, and the trench is almost finished. If the maggots have nothing to eat, it will be difficult for them to spread to our side, right? There's something in the ground. There's never a lack of something." Not knowing how to explain to this group of people, Su lowered his head and rubbed his brows. According to the law of reproduction of creatures in the apocalypse, Once any creature mutates and has the ability to reproduce, its number will become extremely terrifying, whether it is the mutated maggots or the mutated chickens in Bafang village. It is all the same. These creatures are either not discovered by humans or once discovered by humans, their numbers will surely be so large that they can no longer be concealed. To know whether there are any mutant creatures in the land of Bafang village, one has to look at the mutant bushes that have almost grown around the entire village. Su once planted the mutant bushes that he brought out from the safe zone under the wall of Bafang Villa. But the mutant bushes outside Bafang Villa need artificial feeding to reproduce, and the mutant bushes that she instructed Brother Abeo to throw into the trench of Bafang village were never taken care of at all, and soon they were about to fill the trench. This proved that there was indeed some kind of creature in the land of Bafang village. Whether it is mutated maggots, mutated chickens, or some other creatures, as long as they exist, they will attract the maggots in the safe zone to eat them. How about we run? The person who spoke was Liang Xiaoqi, who was holding Brother Pai's son in her arms. Because the other doctors and nurses had to take care of the child, she came to the meeting today on behalf of the medical team. It's still not realistic to talk about running. Brother Pai tilted his head, teased the son in Liang Xiaoqi's arms, and said to Liang Xiaoqi, "Look at us, we have a family to support." Not to mention the other elderly and children. Su is about to give birth. If we keep going on like this, I'm afraid she will give birth on the road. As soon as Brother Pai said this, Su's mother, who had originally intended to run, shook her head firmly and said, No. The road is too chaotic. If we leave here and avoid the maggots, there might be another snake, insect, rat, and ant infestation. My Su is already 8 months pregnant. If she moves, she could give birth at any time. What will happen if she gives birth on the road? They have already taken root in Bafang village. It will be very troublesome to move again. They need to prepare all kinds of supplies, medical equipment, old people, and children for the journey. So there is no other way to go now, they can only defend. Speaking of snakes, insects, rats, and ants, I remember one thing. Among the silent crowd, Mei Xingnan twisted her buttocks. She was sitting on a chair with a backrest at that time. As her buttocks twisted, the wooden chair with a backrest made a very ambiguous creaking sound. Suddenly, most of the men present looked at her ace. She was wearing an ultra-short tulle skirt today, and judging from the style of the skirt, it looked a bit like she had stolen it from Qiao Si. Su felt a little pain in her head. She didn't know how the war between Mei Xingnan and Qiao Si would develop. Mei Xingnan was so arrogant that she snatched Qiao Si's clothes to wear. Wasn't she afraid of making Qiao Si angry to death? I heard that before the end of the world, this village had an ant plague. They also eliminated the 4 pests. How do you know about what happened before the end of the world? The one who asked the question was Brother Pai. He was really curious. Before and after the apocalypse, there were 2 completely different worlds. In the apocalypse, everyone was struggling to escape. Who would care about an ant plague in a rural corner? The women sitting next to Mei Xingnan, who were wearing heavy makeup and revealing clothes, immediately started to giggle. One of them, twisting her bright red nails, raised a finger to Brother Pai and said in a coquettish voice, "Of course I heard it from a man." Maisie even forgot which man it was. Brother Pai, who was sitting far away, just laughed and tacitly stopped asking questions. However, Su frowned, stood up from the chair, supported her waist, walked under the eaves, and said to everyone, "Actually, I don't advocate running either. It's not because I'm about to give birth, but where should we run to? The zombies are heading to Chuncheng. Apart from Chuncheng, if we go north, aren't all those big and small safe zones the same as Bafang village?" Su called out to King Kong, but she found that there was no trace of King Kong in the yard. Not only King Kong was not there, but Zhuo Shijia was also not there. She wondered if Zhuo Shijia had gone to King Kong to tell him about her suspected pregnancy. Of course, Zhuo Shijia had been trapped in the corpse tide for so many days, and she finally came out, so she naturally wanted to tell King Kong the good news. So Su did not go to look for King Kong, but said to Gotzi, "You should work harder these days and bring those superpowers with you." As for the soldiers, besides doing hard labor, they have many other uses. They can also be used for military training. Okay, no problem, leave it to us. Gotzi and the special forces behind him nodded. Now that Yi Yu and King Kong were not there, Su Su was their leader. They would do whatever Su Su said, and it made no sense to anyone. After giving instructions on the defense, Su Su asked his mother and brother Pai to organize the wood-type psychics in Bafang village to produce as much rice, wheat, vegetables, and fruits as possible and store them. They would tell them how these wood-type psychics usually work, and from now on their workload would be doubled. Because if a tide of maggots really runs into Bafang village, it is estimated that there will be no space left to grow rice, wheat, vegetables, and fruits. By then, such a large population will have to rely on stockpiling food to survive. Then the top priority is Bafang Villa. Now the 4 pregnant women in Bafang Villa have given birth to babies. Together with Qiao Si's son, Bafang Villa has a total of 14 babies, as well as Li Xia's Lao Gan Ma and 2 or 3 elderly people. These 2 or 3 elderly people in their 80s and 90s were among the hostages sent by Xia Yaoshi and Chu Xian. Su Su did not let them do heavy work because of their age. In this way, the things were broken down one by one, and soon, the atmosphere of the entire Bafang village was different. Originally, everyone's life was leisurely, but now, after being frightened by Su Su, the pace became much faster. The excavator that Su's father found worked day and night. Originally, the coolies did not have to work under the scorching sun, but now they began to dig trenches day and night. Mei Shengnian and the others really stopped causing trouble. They listened to Su Su's words, put on long sleeves and long pants, and tidied up the clothes they had snatched from Qiao Si and sent them back. They finally dressed like decent women and spent all day in the laundry room washing clothes and doing some sewing and mending for the men. Su's mother and brother Pai began to store food. Gobatian was so busy every day that he could not get off the ground. On the roofs of Bafang village, the number of psychics responsible for vigilance was 3 times more than usual, and people walked much faster. Then, amidst such intensive preparations, hundreds of people came to the entrance of Bafang village one day and shouted, "Let us in. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Why can't you let us in? Didn't you build this village for humans to take refuge? Please, let us in." The noise coming from the distant village entrance made Su Su in the villa suddenly open her eyes. She turned her head to look at Yi Yu, who was lying beside her, with his face and skin already showing signs of being burnt. She reached out and touched Yi Yu's forehead, which was so hot that you could fry an egg on it. Su Su quickly took her hand back, half raised her body and looked at her palm, and saw a smear of black ash on her white palm. Before she could frown, she heard the noisy sound from the direction of the village entrance getting louder and louder, as if she could hear someone cursing something. So Su Su got up, put on a baggy maternity skirt, put on shoes without laces, walked out of the bedroom door, went downstairs, and saw Su's mother hurriedly coming into the main room from the yard. Su Su asked, "Mom, it seems like there are a lot of people outside. A lot of them, a huge crowd of people. I heard they are the survivors sent here by Wang Zijiao. The maggots in the safe zone can no longer hold on. Wang Zijiao can no longer support these survivors, so he sent them to our place." Su's mother frowned tightly. There were only a few hundred people in Bafang village at present, and only one would-type mutant Gobatian. In addition to the mutated soil that Su's mother collected in the truck and the chickens that were abundant in Bafang village, it was no problem to raise a few hundred people. It would not be difficult to raise the hundreds of people sent by Wang Zijiao either. But the key question is, this group of survivors was sent by Wang Zijiao and Li Ying. They sent one batch today and another batch tomorrow. Did Li Ying regard Su Su's Bafang village as a shelter or a rear base? Moreover, in view of the impending crisis, Bafang village has been sealed off. Those 100 people have no ability to work at all, which is somewhat inconsistent with Su Su's style of doing things. With so many people coming at once, it is very difficult to arrange, organize, and investigate. If you are not careful, there will be chaos. Not only will the survivors be in chaos, but the originally orderly Bafang village will also be in chaos. These survivors were all very anxious, fearing that the maggots would catch up with them, so they waited at the entrance of the village for a while, cursing and complaining. The few psychics guarding the gate of Bafang village were so angry that they didn't want to open the door for the survivors outside. So they kept the door closed and waited for Su Su to come and see before making any plans. Didn't Wang Zijiao and Li Ying break out of the maggot tide? Why are they back to guard the safe zone? Su Su tilted her head, muttered to herself, walked a few steps outside the yard, and said to her mother, "Mom, I'll go check it out. You stay in the village." "Hey? Su Su, you haven't eaten yet." Mother Su turned around, looked at Su Su's back and yelled, then quickly ran to the table, picked up 2 big white steamed buns, caught up with Su Su, and handed them to her. "Man is iron and rice is steel. No matter how urgent it is, you have to finish your breakfast. You are not hungry, but my grandson is." I know. Su Su absent-mindedly grabbed a big white steamed bun in one hand, took a bite of it in front of her mother, and then continued to eat the bun as she walked forward. The closer she got to the village gate, the louder the noise became. She grabbed 2 buns and walked to the watchtower, climbed up the stone stairs, and saw that outside the gate of Bafang village, there was indeed a large crowd of people. Black-hearted, inhumane. If you watch people die without helping them, humanity will perish. You are the executioners. Open the door for us quickly. Please let the elderly and children go in first. All kinds of cursing and begging sounds came from outside the door. Most of these people were old people and children, and there were some skinny men. They all looked anxious, but they didn't have much energy to curse, just like African refugees who had been hungry for a long time. Su Su looked at the crowd and saw a large group of cars parked in the distance, as if watching the excitement. Those were not the survivors sent by Li Ying, but some idle convoys. Most of them had some capable people, or a few survivors. They formed one or several convoys and wandered around in the doomsday, looking for a safe place to be reborn. Obviously, those convoys were not optimistic about Bafang village because it was too close to the maggot tide. And there were so many old people and children gathered outside Bafang village, which meant that Bafang village was also under heavy burden. So most of the survivors of these convoys did not stay in Bafang village, but drove directly along the country road, apparently planning to leave here and head north. Looking back at the group of people who came to the entrance of Bafang village, Su Su frowned. Bafang village could afford to support more than 100 people, but what on earth did Li Ying and Wang Zijiao want to do by sending more than 100 people to her? Su Su, what should we do? On the watchtower, behind Su Su, Brother Pai and King Kong stood one after the other. Brother Pai had a sad face, while King Kong had no expression. Su Su turned around and took a closer look at King Kong. Why didn't he look happy or sad at all? Did Zhuo Shijia find out that she was not pregnant? She decided to ask Zhuo Shijia later, then glanced at Brother Pai's face, thought for a while, and said to Brother Pai, "There are so many survivors in this world, and there will be more survivors in the future. Even if we let everyone in, we still don't have enough food to feed all the old, weak, women and children in the world. Yes, the key problem is that these people were sent by Li Ying." Brother Pai frowned, looking at the old and young outside with some reluctance. "We open this door today, and tomorrow Li Ying will send some more people. Should we accept them or not?" "That's not good. It's okay for the young and strong men, but for the old people and children, look at these old people. The oldest are in their 80s and 90s, and the young ones are only 1 or 2 years old, and some are still in swaddling clothes. If these people are not allowed in, they can't walk. Even if you give them a car, they won't be able to drive it." Someone on the watchtower couldn't help but say this. Su Su turned around and saw that the person who said this was Qingmu. This person was on the watchtower with King Kong. He had been hiding in the corner silently, with no sense of existence. Suddenly he said this, and all those who were against opening the door fell silent. "That makes sense, but forget it, Su Su. You should let the elderly and children in first, and leave the men outside for now. Register them one by one, and then let them in. Do you think this will work?" Brother Pai was actually also hesitant. Everyone was hesitant in their hearts. After Qingmu said this, Brother Pai's will was shaken, because the old people and children outside looked so pitiful, and it really made people's hearts ache. Su looked at Brother Pai again, and then looked around. Although the people on the watchtower didn't say anything, their expressions showed that they all supported letting the old people and children in first. Although the men among this group of survivors are thinner, it is also expected that Li Ying's development model is only to acquire, and she has never thought about production. Naturally, the materials are not enough. The mutant bushes in the trenches of Bafang village grow very lush. Except for the final finishing work, the entire Bafang village will claim to be an integrated whole. Although the elderly and children cannot be considered as labor, if you watch them fall into crisis without helping them when you are capable, then it is not just your values that are wrong, but your entire person.
Shushunari.
Since everyone thought that the elderly and children should be put in, then let them in. Anyway, she doesn't have to take care of them, and the entire Bafang village will take care of them. Then, Su took a closer look at the large group of people outside, and suddenly realized the problem. She tilted her head and asked King Kong with a stern look in her eyes, "Why are there no women among these people?" Not only were there no women, there were no older girls either. I asked around, and all the women were left behind by Li Ying to serve as comfort women for the army. King Kong looked a little reluctant. Brother Pai lowered his head and said nothing. Su was stunned when she heard this. Instantly, a surge of anger surged into her heart. She supported her waist and walked back and forth on the watchtower. She pointed at King Kong and the group of survivors outside the gate. There were crying children and an old man holding a child. The child shouted loudly for his mother. "Where is his mother?" The old man could only lower his head and wipe his tears. Su opened her mouth, gritted her teeth, and pinched her palms hard, saying angrily, Li Ying, I used to think you were someone who would do anything to get ahead, but now I realize that you have lost your humanity to this extent. From now on, Bafang village is not allowed to let Li Ying, Wang Zijiao, and anyone else from their team in. There were hundreds of survivors, most of whom were elderly people and children, and some men. But a closer look revealed that all the men were skinny and missing limbs. It would be more accurate to say that these people were abandoned by Wang Zijiao and Li Ying's team rather than being sent here by Wang Zijiao. The young and strong men were responsible for defense construction. The women were responsible for comforting the troops, the elderly, children, and the disabled could not do anything, and keeping them would be a waste of food, so these people were abandoned by Li Ying and came to Su. In fact, Su did not object to young and strong men working as laborers to build defenses, but Li Ying herself was a woman. She separated the child and the mother and forced the mother to stay behind to comfort the troops. This behavior made Su extremely angry. Maybe it was because Su's belly was big, or maybe her hormone levels were a little high. Su just couldn't stand Li Ying's behavior. Li Ying had just made her suffer a setback, so she had to retaliate and make Li Ying suffer a setback as well. Immediately, Su asked Brother Pai to arrange people to put the elderly and children into Bafang village. The men with missing limbs stayed outside the village for the time being, waiting to enter in batches. Then Su sent King Kong, a wind-type mutant, to deliver a letter to Li Ying, requiring her to release all the women she had held captive within 3 days, otherwise she would be blamed for stabbing her in the back. Although Bafang village is now facing internal and external troubles and is not peaceful, Su knows that the situation on Li Ying and Wang Zijiao's side is even worse than hers. At least Li Ying and Wang Zijiao are not on the same page, and they are facing a tide of maggots and the issue of whether to stay or go in the future. If the threat from Su is added, it will be enough to make Li Ying and Wang Zijiao suffer. After threatening Li Ying, the next thing to consider was how to accommodate the hundreds of elderly, weak, sick, and disabled people. Among those children, some were too young to walk, some had just learned to walk, and some were running around. They were very difficult to manage. As for the elderly, some were too old to take care of one child each. Those who had a little strength took care of several children. Some of the children were Li Ying's biological children, some were picked up on the road, and some were forcibly separated from their mothers by Li Ying and thrown to them. In short, there were about 40 or 50 children and 30 elderly people left on the open space in Bafang village, all of whom were starved to death by Li Ying. How about this? The coolies in Bafang village, each of you can take one child and one old person back home. Is that okay? Looking at the busy gate of Bafang village, Brother Pai also had a headache. King Kong received Su Su's message and flew away like a gust of wind, leaving Brother Pai to give Su Su advice. Su Su thought about it and felt that it was possible. There were many coolies in the Bafang village. The last bit of defense construction was about to be completed, and the coolies would soon be idle. It would not be a problem for one coolie to take care of an old man and a child. The key issue is that everyone agreed to let these poor survivors in, so the entire Bafang village has the obligation to support them. How can that be achieved if only a few people do good deeds? Since good deeds have already been done, then everyone in Bafang village should do good deeds. Besides, there are those disabled people outside, Su Su said, standing on the watchtower, looking at the remaining 30 men outside. They might be missing an arm or a leg. They have already lined up and are waiting to register before entering Bafang village. Su Su thought for a moment and said to Brother Pai, "We arranged for these disabled people to work on the land, but the elderly have to take care of the children, so they won't go." In fact, everyone understood that Li Ying simply treated Su Su as a person to clean up her mess. Not only did she want to climb up the ladder, but she also had no sense of responsibility. When she wanted to develop her power, she only selected people who were useful. The elderly, children, and the disabled were all regarded as burdens by Li Ying. What choice could Su Su make? Bafang village was so big that it could accommodate the elderly, children, and disabled people. They were at the gate of Bafang village, so they couldn't just turn these people away and watch them get eaten by maggots, right? Of course, everyone feels bad when encountering such a thing. Although everyone is reluctant to help Li Ying clean up the mess, no one blames Su Su for doing so. The old man and the child are so innocent. Just because the old man is old and has burned his whole life, he can no longer contribute his strength, and the child is still young and is far from the time to contribute his strength. He becomes the object of Li Ying's abandonment. The same is true for people with disabilities. Just wait and see. In a world without restraints and laws at the end of the world, a person like Li Ying will not restrain herself at all. Her desires will only grow more and more, and her actions will only become more and more outrageous. The gangsters in Bafang village and Li Xiaoyu were busy until the afternoon. The more than 100 old, weak, and disabled people were finally settled. However, before everyone in Bafang village could catch their breath, King Kong came back like a gust of wind and said to Su Su, who was standing under the locust tree with a serious face, "The message has been passed on to Li Ying, and Li Ying has promised to release the women, but be prepared. The maggot tide is coming." Along the way, King Kong flew very fast. He was now a third-level wind-type mutant. He could fly in the air for half an hour without falling like a gust of wind. So, he really flew for half an hour and found the camp where Li Ying and Wang Zijiao were stationed. At that time, Li Ying and Wang Zijiao were arguing about whether to go or stay. In a circle of people, each of them brought their own followers, forming an opposing camp. When King Kong landed on top of their car, Li Ying's people were just about to draw their guns at Wang Zijiao. Speaking of this woman Li Ying, she is both scheming and ruthless, and she has endless means of winning people's hearts. So, she joined Liu Yin's army alone at the beginning, and later won over Wang Zijiao and poached many of Liu Yin's people. Now, she has consolidated her position, and even many of Wang Zijiao's cronies have become her confidants. So of course she is capable of competing with Wang Zijiao. Then, after King Kong threatened Li Ying, he flew away lightly like a martial arts master who came and went without a trace. After he was out of everyone's sight, King Kong went back and secretly captured someone to ask. Only then did he find out why Wang Zijiao and Li Ying, who had finally escaped from the siege of the maggots, stayed here. This is because Wang Zijiao believes that if the maggot tide is not controlled, they will not be able to run far. For the continuation of the human race and for the greater good, he wants to stay here and continue fighting the maggot tide. Li Ying insisted on taking her men to the north. She heard that Chuncheon had developed into a large safe zone and estimated that a base would be established in Chuncheon in the near future. So she wanted to take her men to the north to Chuncheon. She wanted to bring her men to carve out a place for herself there. The key issue is that there are quite a few people supporting Li Ying, but relatively fewer people supporting Wang Zijiao, so Li Ying and Wang Zijiao started to fight among themselves. However, the maggot tide will not stop spreading just because of internal strife among humans. There are so many creatures underground, and because there is still enough food to accommodate these maggots, the maggots develop safely underground for the time being. This time, when King Kong came over, he actually found nests of white maggots coming out of some of the turned-over soil. Each maggot was as big as a baby's arm. He knew that the maggot tide was not far away. Su Su sat under the locust tree, listening to King Kong's words, and looked at the ground under her feet, her face calm. The people around her who heard King Kong's words all looked nervous and panicked.
Liao est bisad Susu. Susu, aren't vrid?
If an enemy comes, we will fight him. If a flood comes, we will block it with earth. What is there to worry about? Instead of worrying, we might as well think about how to get through this difficult time.
Shushustuk her head.
She was not worried at all about the underground of Bafong village because there was nothing underground in Bafong village. Many creatures had been almost eaten by the roots of the mutated bushes. She was mainly worried about the surface. If the maggots came, they couldn't come out from the soil inside Bafong village. She had explored that the deep underground inside Bafong village was full of roots of mutant bushes, so if these maggots came, they could only crawl over from the surface. This was not a big deal. Crawling over from the surface could be used for defense, but what about the mutant birds in the sky? Mutated birds would only appear about 2 or 3 years after the end of the world, but the fact that they didn't appear now didn't mean that there were no mutant birds. Didn't Lu Yin have a mutant eagle and a mutant lark at the beginning? It was still a very difficult thing for humans to survive in the end of the world. Sitting on the tree root, Su Su was thinking far ahead. She turned around, looked at the big locust tree behind her, patted the trunk, and said to Gu Batian, who was standing opposite, "We are all in the same boat now.
You're fine now.
Please urge the trees in my Bafong village." "Thank you." As the tree grows bigger, its branches and leaves will become much larger, and the tree canopy will block out the sun and intercept the birds. Although it may not be able to stop the attack of the mutant birds in the end, it can at least delay the time and give them time to evacuate. In the distance, the cars that were still outside had already driven away. The people in the cars probably thought that Bafong village was near Xiangqing and would be besieged sooner or later, so they would not stay in Bafong village and wait for death. So they did not even bother to go in or take a look at the scenery inside Bafong village. They drove directly, planning to take a detour north to Chuncheon. And right in the watchtower, within sight of the eye, the scene was desolate. In the dry rice fields, large white maggots occasionally emerged. The largest one had a waist thicker than a bucket, and it emerged from the cracked soil with a scarlet mouthpart, heading straight for Bafong village. The mutated bushes in the trenches of Bafong village excitedly revealed their sharp thorns. The green thorns flashed a green glow in the sunlight. From a distance, they looked like sparkling diamonds dotted among the bushes. The surface of the earth has become like this. Underground, in places invisible to humans, the roots of maggots and bushes have probably already become a ball. Some of the psychics stood on the watchtower, while others climbed up the earth wall with ladders, just waiting for Su Su's order. Everyone threw their superpowers out all at once. Su Su was like a general. He first locked onto the maggot as thick as a bucket and threw out an ice superpower. The big maggot was frozen in place. There was nothing challenging about it. The first batch of maggots that came over in the early stage were easily dealt with in 2 or 3 moves. There was no need for the survivors behind the psychics to go into battle. Everyone had originally mustered their strength and were ready to fight the maggots to the death. Everyone had a tragic heart, but the war was declared over in just a few minutes. Maggot versus Bafong village. In the first round, Bafong village wins. Su Su was standing on the watchtower with her big belly, holding up the binoculars given to her by the special forces, observing and saying, "Be patient, be patient." There are not many maggots coming here at the beginning, and the mutant bushes can handle them. It's okay. If there is another maggot tide of this magnitude, don't ring the gong. Let them feed my bushes. No one is allowed to use superpowers to kill maggots anymore. They are all food for my bushes. The situation is not too urgent for the time being, so Su thought about letting her bushes deal with it first. If the bushes can't handle it, it won't be too late to send out the psychics. Now, it's just right to use these maggots to feed the bushes, so Su doesn't have to find a way to raise maggots to feed the bushes. Just after he gave the order that no one was allowed to go out to kill maggots, Brother Pai brought over 3 disabled people. One had a broken arm, one had a broken leg, and another had a large dent on his face, as if there was no skin at all. From the side, one could see his teeth and tongue without opening his mouth. Brother Pai asked the 3 people to stand on the steps leading to the watchtower, and he went up to the watchtower and stood behind Su. He said, Su, I found 3 people with wood-type abilities, but their levels are very low. They all said that they activated their wood-type abilities after being bitten by zombies. Hearing this, Su turned around and saw the wood-type mutant standing on the steps. The flesh on his face was gone, and his white teeth looked very scary. She nodded, walked out of the watchtower without feeling anything, stood on the steps, and asked, What can you all do? The wood-type mutant with no flesh on his face stepped back with an inferiority complex, walked down 2 steps, lowered his head, raised his hands, and in his dirty palms lay a black seed. The wood-type mutant was holding back energy, with sweat all over his forehead. That's all I know. The wood-type mutant with no flesh on his face lowered his head and spoke in a low voice. In front of someone as clean as Su, he felt so inferior that his whole body was shaking. He was also afraid that Su would hate him and throw him out to feed the maggots. Tears welled up in his eyes, and it looked like he was about to cry soon.
Fine.
Su nodded, stretched out her white fingers, and picked up the seed in the palm of the superpower's hand with her fingertips. She looked at it, and then studied the superpower with no flesh on his face for a while, and suddenly asked, The flesh on your face was bitten off by a zombie? Yes, it was my daughter. Who bit me? It wasn't a zombie, it was my daughter. The wood-type mutant lowered his head and muttered, emphasizing that it was his daughter who bit him. Although his daughter had turned into a zombie, he didn't want others to call his daughter a zombie. The word zombie hurt him. Then, the wood-type mutant with no flesh on his face suddenly shed 2 tears, which hit the stone steps with 2 slight sounds. Behind him, the 2 wood-type mutants with missing arms and legs seemed to be infected by the emotion, and they remembered something in their minds, and their expressions were a little sad. In the end times, everyone who survives has a sad memory. This memory is carried on their souls, and is so heavy that it makes people sigh. Su did not ask any more questions. It seemed that the wood ability of these 3 people was very weak, so weak that Liang was unwilling to cultivate them. When fleeing, she simply sent these 3 people away and abandoned them. At that time, Liang did not expect these 3 people to achieve anything great, right? Therefore, Su did not put too much pressure on these 3 people. He just asked Brother Pai to take the 3 people downstairs, gave them some crystal cores, and let them learn how to grow crops first. In the process of planting, they slowly figured out how to promote the growth of plants and achieve the goal of improving their wood-related abilities. Like these 3 people, several people with special powers have actually been discovered among the laborers in Bafang village recently. However, Su's attitude towards people with special powers is not much different from that towards ordinary people. If their special powers are weak, they will be the same as ordinary people, doing what they should do, working at the same place, eating at the same place, digging trenches, and growing food and vegetables. There's no difference. Even if the superpower becomes stronger, to the 2nd or 3rd level, the most you can do is change your job and do something related to your specialty. As for the rest of the food and benefits, everyone is the same. People with special abilities have no special privileges in Bafang village. By dusk, the gate of Bafang village was sealed tightly, and the sky turned gray. Su ordered that no more maggots should be killed, so the dry rice fields were crawling with white maggots. A little further away, on the road in front of Bafang village, A few cars occasionally passed by, and when they saw that Bafang village was surrounded by maggots, they had no intention of getting out to help. Su Su temporarily dispatched half of the psychics in Bafang village to the tail end of Bafang village to clean up the maggots. The laborers were now given a maximum of 5 hours of sleep a day, with enough food and water, and were required to work at full capacity to dig trenches. After Su Su finished her dinner, she planned to go to the watchtower with a full stomach. This time she was not going to see the maggots, but to see the mutated bushes. As soon as she went out, she heard a commotion outside the yard, followed by a series of footsteps. Su Su stopped at the door of the main room and looked up. It was Su Xiaofeng who was chasing Zhang Anquan. During the chase, Su Xiaofeng roared, "Captain, how many times have you saved us? If it weren't for the captain, you and I would have died 800 times. But now you are so good, leaving him in the tide of corpses. You are so good. I have tried to persuade him, but he is determined to stay in the zombie tide. What can I do?" The one running ahead was Zhang Anquan. He looked back at Su Xiaofeng as he ran forward. When Su Xiaofeng ran past Su Su's yard, he stopped panting, raised one foot, took off his shoes, and threw them at Zhang Anquan's face. He didn't care whether he threw them at Zhang Anquan or not. He just turned around and limped into Su Su's garden. He frowned and said to Su Su, "Su Su, can I ask you for a favor? Can you take me to our captain? The planes are now grounded." Su Su leaned against the door, looking calmly at Su Xiaofeng's messy short hair. She knew without asking that Su Xiaofeng's fight with Zhang Anquan was because of Xia Yaoshi. Because the transport plane can only bring back a dozen people at a time, Zhang Anquan, who was trapped in the tide of zombies, was only picked up today. For various reasons, Su Xiaofeng has been staying in Bafang village recently. Judging from the quarrel between Zhang Anquan and Su Xiaofeng just now, Xia Yaoshi insisted on staying in the tide of zombies. No matter how many times Xia Yaoshi had saved Su Xiaofeng and Zhang Anquan, and no matter how deep Su Xiaofeng's feelings for Xia Yaoshi were, because aviation kerosene was limited and there was a maggot plague outside Bafang village recently, the transport plane would not be operated for the time being. Su Su planned to keep the remaining aviation kerosene in case of emergency. "Su Su, you can't do this to our captain." Su Xiaofeng, who was standing in front of Su Su, pulled his hair anxiously when he heard that the plane was grounded. He said anxiously, "When you were in the safe zone, our captain took care of you. Now he is trapped in the zombie tide, and he is all alone. No one is helping him, not even you. What will he think?" "Su Su, you can't be so hard-hearted." Xia Yaoshi wanted to stay in the tide of zombies on his own initiative. He is not alone. He also has Xie Qingyan and Fei Fei, who volunteered to stay with him. Su Su sneered, looked at Su Xiaofeng, and said this. In fact, what she didn't say was that Xie Qingyan was a water-based supernatural person. Because Xie Qingyan had never taken the water-based supernatural power seriously, he had never practiced it, so Xie Qingyan's supernatural power level was very low. But Xie Qingyan was still able to satisfy the drinking water needs of 3 people. In addition, Fei Fei was a wood-type ability user with a very high level of ability. Su Su estimated that Fei Fei's wood-type ability level was about 3rd level. The food, fruits and vegetables that could be produced were enough for Xia Yaoshi and the other 2 to eat their fill. Xia Yaoshi himself is a user of lightning abilities, the best in the world today. His energy management will soon reach the 4th level, so even if these 3 people stay in the tide of zombies, as long as no one deliberately goes to die, they can still survive. Then, what Su Xiaofeng said made Su Su feel like laughing. When she was in the safe zone, she was indeed taken care of by Xia Yaoshi, but Xia Yaoshi also caused her a lot of trouble. The biggest trouble was Xie Qingyan. Xie Qingyan, who was always thinking about killing her daughter, was now receiving endless protection from Xia Yaoshi. To be honest, the reason why Su Su didn't kill Xia Yaoshi together with him was because Xia Yaoshi took good care of her. So now, let Su Su use up the remaining aviation kerosene to rescue Xia Yaoshi from the zombie tide, yes, but saving Xia Yaoshi must involve Xie Qingyan. No.
But
Su Xiaofeng looked anxious and was about to say something to Su Su, but Zhang Anquan took Su Xiaofeng's shoes, walked to the gate of the yard, interrupted Su Xiaofeng, and said solemnly, "Xiaofeng, you don't understand the captain. He just wants to put himself in a desperate situation on purpose to let the ignorant Xie Qingyan understand that things are different now. He is forcing Xie Qingyan to face reality." The one who sneered was Su Su. She stood up straight, supported her waist, ignored the two people from Xie Yaoshi, and walked out of the yard. She said something about forcing Xie Qingyan to understand, forcing Xie Qingyan to face the reality. She would just watch as Xie Yaoshi put himself in a desperate situation. She would see if she could force Xie Qingyan to grow up. Now, Bafang village is being surrounded by maggots. This situation has gradually caused different voices in the village. It is not because Su Su ordered not to resist, but because everyone heard a rumor from somewhere that after the maggot tide, there will be a wave of zombies, and that the zombie tide is already on the way. So some people can't help but want to run away. Although these words were not heard openly by Su Su, they had already secretly formed an atmosphere of terror in Bafang village. Everyone was worried, fearing maggots attacking the village during the day and zombies crawling into the village at night. So it was no wonder that some people wanted to leave Bafang village. It's human nature, there's nothing to complain about. There are also Li Ying and Wang Zijiao outside the safe zone. No one knows what's going on. They may have fought or may have parted ways. These people and things, internal and external troubles, are all intertwined together. Su Su can't care about so many now. All her energy is now focused on how to survive the maggot tide and how to welcome Xiao Ai's arrival. After leaving his own yard, Su Su went up to the watchtower again. The sky had darkened. There was a bright searchlight installed on each of the two watchtowers. The energy source of the light was solar panels, which were hung on the top of the watchtower. After being charged during the day, the people on the watchtower would turn on the searchlight at night to illuminate the maggots crawling on the ground in the dark ahead. There are more maggots at night than during the day. Whether they are zombies or mutant creatures, they are more active at night. At nightfall, in Bafang village, solar-powered electric poles lit up the streets. Apart from the patrolling special forces and gangsters, there were rarely any laborers, elderly people, or children walking around outside. The maggots outside the wall were crawling, and the pale hairy moon was still hanging in the dark sky, which made people feel very uncomfortable. In this seemingly peaceful environment, in a villa, several people with special abilities were having a meeting. Right next to the conference table, Li Anxin was carried onto the table by a psychic. The group of psychics around the conference table were not surprised and took it as a normal occurrence, and continued with their meeting. One of them said, "I heard that nowadays, no matter which team out there, they all worship people with special abilities as leaders. Only this Bafang village is living a pathetic life." That's right. When your ability level is low, you have to do hard labor. Even when your ability level is high, it doesn't seem to be much easier. Why should we, the ability users, be treated the same as ordinary people? He can't even play with a woman, and this which has to come to him on her own initiative. If we go out into the world, who wouldn't be second to none? So, this is the bad thing about women being leaders. They have no foresight and only care about their own little piece of land. What big things can they accomplish? Since we are already superpowers, we are superior to ordinary people. It is only natural that we should be supported by crystal cores. Why should we work in exchange? Women are so fussy. Look at how many old people and children have come to Bafang village recently. What are these people for? There are also so many disabled people with missing limbs. TSK, I don't think we can stay in Bafang village any longer. If we continue like this, we will be dragged to death by these burdens. Su Su shouldn't have opened the door to those people. She should have thrown them to feed the maggots right away. How about we go talk to Su Su and protest? Ha, what's the point of telling her? She has 18 men to rely on. Will she care about people of our level? He zipped up his pants contentedly and walked back to the conference table to sit down. As soon as he sat down, the second man at the conference table stood up and walked towards Li Anxin at the table. This man's movements were not as gentle as the previous man. Lianxin couldn't help but groan in pain, and the man grabbed Lianxin's hair, laughing. Come on, shout louder for me. Keep your voice down, or the patrol outside might hear you. Someone was afraid that Lianxin's humming was too loud and would be heard by people outside, so he couldn't help but say something out loud. The man, while torturing Lianxin, said nonchalantly, What are you afraid of? The worst that can happen is that we can just leave this Bafong village. Besides, this little witch came to us on her own accord. We didn't force her to come here, ha 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 ha. That's right, Lianxin offered herself to the door because she was afraid of death. She thought that these people with special abilities had become a small group in Bafong village. If she followed this small group, her life would be guaranteed. If they wanted to leave, they could take her away from this hellhole. So she would come here on her own initiative every night without the need for these men to call her. What if she was tortured a little by the men? In this apocalypse, if a woman had no skills, she could only provide her body for men's entertainment. This was the only way for women to survive. So Lianxin obeyed very well and hummed softly, feeling extremely happy. And because of the initiative of both parties, Su did not notice the darkness behind Bafong village. When she went up to the watchtower, Zhuo Shijia was disinfecting the watchtower inside and out. She was wearing a white coat, a disposable blue mask on her face, and a bottle of alcohol in her hand, spraying here and there. When she turned around, she saw Su standing behind her with a big belly. Zhuo Shijia was startled, put away the alcohol in her hand, pulled down the mask, and with a resentful expression on her pale face, she complained to Su, Why are you so quiet? You are too obsessed with what you do. Su shrugged, turned around, walked behind the searchlight, looked around, and saw two psychics standing outside the observation tower. Only one of them was Zhuo Shijia, so she asked, I've been so busy these past few days that I forgot to ask you. What are you doing?
I'm pregnant.
Zhuo Shijia's face showed a hint of joy, but then he said worriedly, I haven't told anyone about this, and you shouldn't tell anyone either. King Kong didn't say anything either?
No. Why?
The fetus is unstable. I've been spotting for the past few days. I'm afraid I can't keep it. She put down all the disinfection items in her hands, walked to Su with an expressionless face, found a small stool and sat down, hugged her thin and weak body. Her eyes were a little empty and a little dull, and suddenly she laughed bitterly and said to Su, I am an obstetrician and gynecologist. In the past, I often advised others to follow the survival law of the fittest in nature. Most of the fetuses that are aborted naturally are bad fetuses. Even if they are saved with great efforts, they may not grow up healthily in the future. But now that it has happened to me, I really want to let it go, but it is so difficult to let it go. Behind the searchlight, in the dimly lit watchtower, Su stepped forward and reached out to touch Zhuo Shijia's head. She didn't know how to persuade Zhuo Shijia. The world was like this now. Even if there were ways to preserve the fetus, there were no drugs or equipment to do so. Zhuo Shijia is a doctor herself, and she has always been against trying to preserve the fetus. She has always adhered to the natural law of survival of the fittest. At the same time, she has longed for many years to have a child of her own. Now that she finally has one, there are signs of miscarriage. She doesn't know what kind of torment she is in. I understand. Su sighed and could only say these two words. Apart from these two words, she didn't know what else to say. The two were silent for a while, and then they heard Zhuo Shijia say, Me? Su raised her eyebrows and looked down at Zhuo Shijia. You are very courageous. You knew from the beginning that you wanted this child, and you tried your best to protect your little love. Even though the end of the world has come, your determination to protect your little love has not changed at all, and has become even more determined. Dr. Zhuo, if you are so hesitant, just try your best. This is the end of the world, and people's physical constitutions will change to some extent. If any woman has spotting right after getting pregnant, it would be a dilemma. She would try her best to save a bad pregnancy, but perhaps the final result would only show that everything she does now is in vain. But now is the end of the world, and the human body will mutate. If the child can be saved, he may survive, because in the end of the world, everything is possible. This is a world that makes people despair, but at the same time it is full of hope. So Su Su thought, since Zhuo Shijia was so conflicted, why not give it a try? Maybe Zhuo Shijia could fulfill her regret of not having children in this life? Zhuo Shijia didn't say anything and fell into silent thought. Su Su patted her shoulder and gave her silent encouragement, then turned around to observe the mutated bushes in the trench. At this time, it would be better to let Zhuo Shijia be alone. Whether to try her best to save the child should be decided by Zhuo Shijia herself. The watchtowers are set right next to the earth wall. Because these two watchtowers have been modified repeatedly by Su's father, they have become very large now. It is said that after the coolies complete the last bit of defense, Su's father will raise the two watchtowers a little higher. Outside the watchtower, Su's father specially built an observation platform. The platform has extended out of the earth wall and is just above the trench. Standing on this platform, one can see the bushes in the trench clearly. One of the psychics in charge of lighting the searchlight, under the command of Su Su, shone the searchlight into the trench. Su Su stood on the observation deck and looked down, and found that the mutant bushes in the trench had grown lushly, like a green river, winding around the earthen bridge of Bafong village. It seems that her mutant bushes have been eating well these days, and they are growing so fast that they are about to spread out of the trench. Su Su was very satisfied. He put one hand on the lampshade of the searchlight, turned the lamp head, and swept it towards the tide of maggots in front of him. There was still only a thin layer, and it was not piled very high. It was estimated that some of the maggots would be eaten by the mutant bushes. So, it was enough to let the mutant bushes deal with it. Just when Su Su felt satisfied, there was a bulge under the thin layer of maggots in front of her, as if some creature was swimming under a piece of white cloth, and it rushed directly towards the platform where Su Su was standing. Su Su let go of the searchlight and took a step back. The two psychics standing behind her seemed to have seen the white arch in front of them. One of them was preparing to strike the gong, and the other was accumulating supernatural powers. However, at this moment, a very thick white pillar suddenly shot out from under the platform. It was so fast that Su Su only had time to put his hands forward, and two silver white ice cones shot out. The white pillar then shrank back, coming and going without a trace. The white arch in the distance also disappeared. What's this? Behind Su Su, one of the psychics was stunned. What happened just now happened too fast, and he had not yet reacted. Maggot! Su Su answered him with one word. Compared to the two people who looked dumbfounded behind her, Su Su, a pregnant woman with a big belly, seemed extremely calm. She turned around with a stern face and said to the two people behind her, "I beat him back. I don't know if he is dead. Notify everyone to be on high alert. Such a big, thick and long maggot?" The two psychics had incredible expressions on their faces. They had seen maggots thicker than a baby's arm, maggots thicker than a snake, and maggots thicker than a bucket. But these maggots were as big as pillars. This doomsday was too crazy. This doomsday was too exaggerated. Yes. After being shocked, the two psychics reacted, and one of them started to beat the gong vigorously. There were already many psychics standing on the roofs of Bafong village, and now they all came to the watchtower. When Su Su saw this, she opened her mouth and wanted to say that there was no need to beat the gong, because there couldn't be so many maggots that big, and since she had beaten them back, they wouldn't have a few days to recover, so how could they come out to make a presence again? But since such a big maggot had appeared, and if she didn't allow the gong to be struck, it would seem that she had no sense of crisis, so she just let these people go, and went straight back to the watchtower. At this time, Zhuo Shijia was still sitting on the stool, lost in thought about her troubles, so Su Su stepped forward and supported Zhuo Shijia, and the two of them walked out of the watchtower together. Someone hurriedly floated up the stairs. Su Su tilted her head and saw that it was King Kong. However, because someone struck the gong, King Kong and the others felt that the situation was urgent and had no time to say anything to Zhuo Shijia and Su Su. So when Su Su walked down the stairs, she thought for a moment and said to Zhuo Shijia, I used to think that the child was born by me, and I would be able to raise her in the future. But my parents told me that whether you accept it or not, you should know about the existence of this child. Dr. Zhua, I understand that you are not sure whether to keep the baby or not, but I think you should discuss this matter with King Kong. No matter what happens, he has the right to know whether to keep the child or not. I know that he and Zhua Shijia once had a child. What Su Su didn't say was that if Zhua Shijia still decided to follow her natural law of survival of the fittest and gave up the child, and if King Kong knew about this one day in the future, it might cause great unhappiness between the two of them. Because Su Su felt that most of the people in Yiyu's group were orphans. In fact, although they didn't say it on the surface, they really wanted to have a home and relatives in their hearts. Su Su knew from Yiyu's expectations for Xiao Ai that King Kong and Yiyu were brothers, so their personalities and preferences would not be very different. Zhua Shijia still didn't say anything. She just nodded, indicating that she had heard Su Su's words. Then she helped Su Su down the last step. Under the solar street lights in the village, the two walked slowly forward. People around me kept running towards the watchtower, as if they were affected by the gong. However, more people closed their doors and windows, fearing that some unsolvable trouble would arise at the watchtower and the village would be lost. After taking only 2 steps, she saw a disheveled woman rushing out from the empty road ahead, followed by a man. The woman ran forward, and just a few meters in front of Su Su. She knelt on the ground with a thump sound, and she began to cry, Su Su, Su Su, please save me, I'm being bullied, please save me, someone is bullying me. What are you talking about? Following the woman was Brother Pai's subordinate, Brother Abeo. Brother Abeo's face was red and furious. He ran to Su Su and pointed at the woman kneeling on the ground. He said to Su Su, Su Su, I saw her coming out of the coolie's house so late, so I grabbed her and wanted to ask her what she was doing. What's wrong with me coming out of the men's house? Look at Mei Xingnan and the others. Aren't they also going in and out of the men's houses? The woman raised her head, her face full of tears. Her neck, buried in her clothes, looked red and purple under the streetlight, which was very tempting. She knelt and took 2 steps forward, thinking of reaching out to hug Su Su's legs, but Su Su stepped back 2 steps, protecting her belly, and stared at the woman's face carefully and said in surprise, Lianxin, you haven't left yet? Lianxin actually stayed in Bafang village. Su Su remembered that she had told Li Xiaoyu to send Lianxin away. Why didn't Lianxin leave? Lianxin's expression faltered for a moment. Then he straightened his back and said with courage, there are too many maggots outside. I can't leave, Su Su. This man is bullying me. Lianxin almost made it clear that the focus now was that the man Abeo bullied her, not the question of whether she should leave or not. How did Abeo bully you? Su Su was a little impatient. Although she was asking Lianxin, her tone was a little interrogative. Before Lianxin could reply, Brother Bao was so anxious that he jumped up and down and said loudly, how did I bully her? She is a woman and she didn't stay in the villa. She was wandering around so late. I thought she was causing trouble, so I caught her and asked her. I didn't do anything to cause any damage. There are so many maggots outside. What good would it do me to cause any damage? Lianxin was also anxious. She was originally listed as a suspect after being found in Lu Yin's 3 military trucks. Now Brother Abeo accused her of sabotage. Wasn't this deliberately forcing her to death? So Lianxin said bluntly, I just want to change some food. Hapo village will provide food to everyone. What else do you want to exchange for food? Su Su lowered her head and looked at Lianxin's neck. She didn't need to ask Lianxin how to exchange for food. How else could she exchange for food? It was nothing more than the same as Mei Xingnan did before, exchanging her body for food. That. Lianxin knelt on the ground with her head lowered, twisting the hem of her clothes with her fingers, not knowing what to say to Su Su. Of course she knew that Bafang village would distribute food to everyone, and the 3 meals a day were very generous, but now it was the end of the world, and the outside of Bafang village was surrounded by maggots again. There were so many people with special abilities in Bafang village, but they didn't go out to kill the maggots. If the maggots rushed into Bafang village one day, wouldn't there be nothing to eat? So Li Anxin felt that he should prepare for a rainy day, stock up on some food first, and then find a way to get Li Xiuyu to follow those psychics to Chuncheng and leave the dangerous place of Bafang village. Seeing Li Anxin's guilty face, hesitating and unable to explain anything, Su Su had no patience to wait for Li Anxin to finish her words. The situation was very chaotic now, and she had no time to play with Li Anxin here, so she said in a bad tone, "Okay, stop saying that. Everyone is very busy. The men here are busy working during the day and resting at night. From now on, you are not allowed to run into men's rooms. If you want to do flesh trade, you will naturally have plenty of business to do when you go to Chuncheng or other safe areas in the future, but not here. Don't worry, Li Anxin, I don't intend to keep you. If you want to leave now, no one will care. If you don't want to leave, just stay here honestly and don't make trouble." After that, Su Su and Zhuo Shijiao left, leaving Li Anxin kneeling on the ground, her face turning pale and blue, but she didn't feel embarrassed at all. What face did Li Anxin have now? If people wanted to save face, they couldn't survive in the end times. She had only one idea at the moment. Su Su might as well let her do the flesh trade in Bafang village. She didn't do any business in the first place. She just provided her body for free to the men who wanted to leave this place to take turns playing with her, just to take her away from this hellhole. During the meeting, they also talked about Li Xiaoyu. They all thought that Li Xiaoyu had delicate and fair skin because of Su Su's care. Although she was not 1/10 as pretty as Mei Xingnan, the fragrance emanating from her body made the men present think about it for a long time. Li Anxin felt that if she could convince Li Xiaoyu to help her serve these men, she would definitely be able to please these men. Then, when the day came for her to leave, those men who were in a good mood would not pull up their trousers and ignore her. Thinking of this, Li Anxin stood up from the ground regardless of Su Su's warning and went to find Li Xiuyu while it was getting dark. Now, because of the critical situation outside Bafang village, Li Xiuyu did not return to Bafang villa. She chose a villa at the entrance of Bafang village to live in. When Li Anxin asked Li Xiaoyu where she lived before, Li Xiaoyu pointed out the place to Li Anxin. But when Li Anxin found Li Xiuyu's residence, Li Xiuyu's villa was pitch black. She stood outside the yard and looked inside, but did not hear any sound in the darkness. She waited and waited, and after about an hour, she saw Li Xiaoyu walking back quickly. A little rain.
Li Anxin callat Li Xiaoyu.
Under the streetlight, Li Xiaoyu paused in her suspenders. She seemed to have seen who was standing outside her yard, and then she walked back at a normal pace. Li Anxin smiled in a flattering manner and asked, "It's so late. Why aren't you resting at home? What have you been doing? There was a gong at the entrance to the village just now. I'll go see what happened. What's wrong with the woman?" Li Xiuyu frowned, put her hands in the pockets of her overalls, and stood in front of Li Anxin. She felt that since Li Anxin was rescued, her whole thinking had become a little distorted, so she said again, "This apocalypse is not aimed at men. When the crisis comes, both men and women will die, so why can't women care so much?" "Oh, don't take it too seriously." Li Anxin pouted and couldn't help but start to teach Li Xiaoyu, "You are in Bafang village. You are too well protected. You don't know how dark the outside world is. For a woman, you just need to serve the man well and be a good man's dependent. The rest of the fighting and killing is the man's business." "I don't agree with what you said." Li Xiaoyu frowned even more tightly. She turned around and faced Li Anxin sideways, pointing at the two bright watchtowers at the entrance of the village. "Why can women only rely on men? Men can fight and kill, but why can't women? The key is, what does it mean to just serve men well? Is this the only value left for women in the end times?" Li Xiaoyu didn't see it just now, but people on the watchtower were saying that a maggot as thick as 5 or 6 people could hug appeared outside Bafang village. It was like a white pillar and suddenly appeared in front of Su Su, but was beaten back by Su Su. Seeing Su Su with such a big belly, she could beat back such a thick maggot by herself. However, these women who were able to do things easily and well were defined by Li Anxin as just serving good men. Why should women just serve good men? Why can they only survive under men? Aren't men more powerful than women? Okay, you have been brainwashed by Su Su now. Lianxin was determined not to argue with Li Xiaoyu about this issue. She lowered her head. In front of such a clean and upright Li Xiaoyu, she felt a little inferior for no reason, so she muttered, "Isn't Su Su also relying on men?" She said that women should be self-reliant, but in the end, she just wanted to live with men and give birth to children for men. After all, she was also afraid that the 18 special forces with special powers would leave, wasn't she? Is the child born for Yu? Li Xiaoyu couldn't help but shouted loudly. She stared at Lianxin. She wondered how many people like Lianxin there were in Bafang village. None of them understood Su Su at all. They had never looked at Su Su from the bottom of their hearts. They just relied on their own subjective consciousness to think that Su Su became pregnant and gave birth to a child just to please Yu and keep the 18 Special Forces soldiers with special powers. Xiao Ai was not born for Yu. Although Xiao Ai came because of Yu, Su Su gave birth to Xiao Ai not to please a man, but to appreciate and love this life. At any time, if a woman wants to get pregnant or have a child, she should not let herself fall into the pain of pregnancy and childbirth in order to please a man and keep a man's body and heart. If maternal love is so superficial, how can the world truly feel the greatness of mothers? This is the most straightforward truth that Su Su taught Li Xiaoyu. So angry, Li Xiaoyu felt that her and Lianxin's thoughts were so contradictory now. She couldn't talk to Li Xiaoyu anymore, so she angrily bypassed Lianxin and went back to her villa. She opened the door and slammed it shut. She didn't want to stay with Lianxin anymore. What do you mean? Why are you throwing such a tantrum? Lianxin, who stayed outside, had no idea why Li Xiaoyu was angry and yelled at her so loudly. After thinking about it, Lianxin only blamed it on the fact that Li Xiaoyu was protected too well and spoiled by the 18 Special Forces soldiers in Bafang village. But speaking of it, although there was no worry about food and drink in Bafang village, the outside was already crawling with maggots, and Su Su did not send anyone out to clear them out, and it seemed that there was no intention to retreat. It was normal for people to panic. Some people advocated defending, and some advocated retreating. However, because there were 18 Special Forces soldiers in Bafang village, these 18 people were enough to resist an army, so more people advocated defending. But after guarding for 2 or 3 days, Su Su still did not send anyone out to clear out the maggots. More and more people advocated retreat, and the leader was Qiao Si. On the second day after Su Su met Lianxin, Qiao Si sent Gubayan to say that they planned to set off for Chuncheng while there were not enough maggots outside. In the main room, Su Su was sitting on a wooden stool eating breakfast. After listening to Gubayan, who was sitting outside the room, explaining his purpose, she nodded, stirred the thick porridge in the bowl with a spoon, and said to Gubayan, "Chuncheng is not safe either. The general direction of the zombie tide is heading towards Chuncheng." Regarding the direction of the zombie tide, Su Su had told the people in Bafang village on the first day she escaped from the zombie tide. Unfortunately, those who believed her, while those who did not believe her thought that she just wanted to retain labor and military force, and said so deliberately to prevent everyone from leaving Bafang Villa. Really? Gubayan was skeptical about what Su Su said. Our eldest lady still wants to go to Chuncheng first. Besides, the eldest young master is in Chuncheng. If there really is a zombie tide, the eldest young master will protect us. Okay, let's go. If you want to leave, I won't keep you. What about Xiao Shi in Bafang Villa? The Xiao Shi she was talking about was the son born to Qiao Si. Since Qiao Si was leaving, should she take the child with her? Unexpectedly, Gubayan lowered his head and said to Su Su with a red face, "I'm sorry, Su Su. Our eldest lady is willful." She said that after she reunited with the eldest young master, she would ask the eldest young master to send someone back to pick up the young master. She dropped the porcelain spoon on her fingertips with a clang. She raised her head, her eyes flashing with a sharp light. She looked at Gubayan and asked, "Is this child really born by Qiao Si?" It's been so many days since the birth, and you haven't even gone to the villa to take a look at the child, let alone hold him. Now you are leaving, but you leave the child with me. What does that mean? Do you think this is a nursery or an orphanage?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Faced with Susu's anger, Gobatian could only keep his head down and apologize. He naturally thought that Xiaoxi's behavior was inappropriate, but seeing that the young master was in Chuncheng and didn't know why he didn't come, Xiaoxi was anxious, and they, the bodyguards, were also anxious. So when Xiaoxi said he wanted to go to Chuncheng to find the young master, Gobatian and the others didn't raise any objections. The journey is difficult in the apocalypse, so it is naturally safer to leave the child with Susu. Although Bafang Village is surrounded by maggots, there are 18 special forces with superpowers in Bafang Village, so it will not be a problem for them to survive the tide of zombies for a few months. Then, Feng Shui can send a plane to pick up the child, and that will be the same. As for whether Xiaoxi was reluctant to give up her son and the maternal love and family affection, Gobatian was not a woman and had no children, so he could not feel such emotions. Therefore, he did not think that Xiaoxi had done anything excessive. He just thought that Xiaoxi was more willful. Nothing else. Okay, get out of here and don't let me see her again. Considering the weapons of the two military trucks, Susu did not force Gobatian and the others to take the child away. Since Feng Shui only wanted a son, the weapons would not be able to escape with the child. It was also better that Xiaoxi did not take the child away, lest the child followed Xiaoxi and die halfway. Xiaoxi and his group were leaving, and having set this precedent, many ordinary survivors could not wait any longer. Everyone had the same idea. While there were not many maggots and the situation had not yet reached the terrifying level in the safe zone, they should leave here quickly and go to some other place that was safe enough. Chuncheng is the most ideal place. I don't know who said it, but Chuncheng has enough troops to guard it. The number of people with special powers is also quite large. All functions of human society have been basically restored and improved, and there are abundant supplies and many entertainment activities. In short, it is a paradise for survivors and people with special powers. As for what Susu said, that the tide of zombies was heading towards Chuncheng, that was simply a fantasy. Who knew whether what Susu said was true or not? It must be that Susu's Bafang village was surrounded by maggots, and Susu didn't want to leave here, so he deceived everyone so that they would stay and help kill the maggots together. Even if we take a step back, if the zombie tide really goes to Chuncheng, Chuncheng has an army and superpowers, so it may not be unable to resist a small zombie tide. So everyone gathered together. Except for Xiaoxi and Gobatian's 8 superpower bodyguards, there were also hundreds of survivors and most of the superpowers. Among them, water-type mutants are the most popular. As long as a water-type mutant shouts, most of them can gather many survivors to follow. Wood-type mutants are also very popular, but there are not many wood-type mutants in Bafang Village. The only 3 are of low level, and they are 3 disabled people. Moreover, the 3 disabled people had no intention of leaving Bafang Village. For them, after experiencing the darkest, hungriest, most terrifying years, where their dignity had been trampled into the mud, death was nothing to be afraid of. Relatively speaking, life in Bafang Village was actually a paradise for them. Thinking back, the 3 of them were often despised in other teams, but in Bafang Village they had food and drink, crystal cores to obtain, and Susu was willing to devote herself to nurturing them, allowing them to find their self-worth, which was pretty good. Then, after a whole day of hustle and bustle, there were still so many maggots outside the wall of Bafang Village. In the village, Brother Pai sorted out the crystal cores of the people who had worked as laborers and then stood under a locust tree, watching these people carrying large and small bags, preparing to load them onto trucks, and set off as if they were fleeing famine. The old people and children stood far away and watched. Some felt sad, as if they were left here to feed the maggots. Some looked calm, as they thought it was good that these young and strong survivors and people with special abilities did not take the old, weak and sick with them, so as to save them the fatigue of traveling and the danger of being abandoned at any time. There were only a small number of survivors and people with special abilities who refused to leave. They all looked at the group of people who were leaving without any feelings, thinking that after this separation, they might never have the chance to meet again in their lives. Of course, they were unwilling to leave, and they must have been in the mood to live and die together with Bafong village. In the end times, they bid farewell to their relatives and friends and survived alone in such a world. They were already homeless and had finally found a place to settle down. Whether they lived or died, they didn't want to move at all. To live was good, of course, but to die, it would be good to see their deceased relatives and children earlier. In the land of parting, life is different in all its aspects. After dinner, Su walked out of the yard yawning, with a big belly bulging, and stood next to Brother Pai, looking at the people in front who were ready to go. Among them was a small group, all men, among whom there were about 2 or 3 people with special abilities, and Lianxin was in this group. Well, Su looked at Lianxin and sighed. She saw that Lianxin was only wearing a thin t-shirt, but Lianxin was completely unaware of it and even thought that such attire was very normal.
Don't sigh.
These men have been held in Bafong village for too long. They are eager to go out and be free. Everyone has their own aspirations. Keeping so many of them here will not have a good impact on the people of Bafong village, young and old. Brother Pai, who was standing beside her, seemed to have heard Su's sigh, so he turned around and tried to comfort Su. He thought that Su was reluctant to see these people leave Bafong village, so he tried his best to enlighten Su. But Su sneered and said to Brother Pai, "If they want to leave, they can leave. You register their names and leave fingerprints for everyone. Those who leave in the future will not be able to come back." In fact, what Su sighed about was not the loss of people in Bafong village, but Lianxin's actions. Looking at Lianxin's appearance today, it seems that she has no intention of climbing out of the quagmire. She is the kind of woman that Su said, who had the opportunity to climb out of the quagmire but jumped back on her own initiative. Of course, men are bound to want to indulge themselves sometimes, and Su can understand this, but Bafong village is managed by Su like a Buddhist temple. Even if there is a beauty like Mei Shengnan, men can only look but not touch. So these men took Lianxin away and vented their desires on Lianxin, and there was nothing to stop them. The key issue is that Lianxin did it voluntarily. She is not like Mei Shengnan. Mei Shengnan appears to be decadent on the surface, but actually she is very proud in her bones. And Lianxin is compared with Mei Shengnan. After a while, the car was ready. Apparently, the group of people who were going to leave had already held a meeting and elected a captain. They planned to follow Qiao Si's car, led by Gu Baitian and his 8 men, and go out together. Everyone started to get on the car one after another. At this time, Li Xiaoyu ran out from somewhere, rushed into the crowd, grabbed Lianxin's arm, and shouted anxiously, "Lianxin, are you crazy? You're crazy. You're crazy." Lianxin struggled hard in Li Xiaoyu's hand like a dying fish. "Li Xiaoyu, let me go. This place will soon be eaten by maggots. I told you to come with me. If you don't go, then don't block me from escaping. Follow these men and run for your life. They are just using you as a tool to vent their anger. They can abandon you at any time." Li Xiaoyu was so angry that she threw Lianxin to the ground and threw her thin and weak body out of the crowd. Li Xiaoyu really didn't understand why Lianxin became like this now. Even if Bafong village was surrounded by maggots and there were many crises here, as long as Lianxin stayed in Bafong village, no man would go against her will and force her to do something she didn't want to do. However, Lianxin was different. She would rather be abused by a group of men than stay in Bafong village and live a life of eating and drinking. What happened to Lianxin's mind? Has a girl's sense of right and wrong and chastity been completely lost?
Hey.
A man stood up in the crowd, with anger in his eyes, blocking Li Xiaoyu and shouting angrily, "Li Xiaoyu, if you come out to stop people, we won't say anything. After all, we respect you as a girl, and you dare to go out and kill zombies, but Lianxin doesn't want to stay here and die. It's a bit too much for you to hit her. Yes, now we are no longer a member of your Bafong village. Lianxin is still our teammate no matter what. You can scold her, but you can't hit her. Lianxin wanted to follow us of her own accord. No one forced her or compelled her. If Lianxin is willing to stay now, we won't say a word. But Lianxin doesn't want to stay. What's the matter with you, Li Xiuyu? Or Li Xiuyu, you can come with us, ha ha ha. The man who was smiling had an obviously ambiguous look on his face. When they were making a living in Bafang village before, they didn't dare to covet the women around Su Su. But if Li Xiaoyu also followed them, this kind of woman would be much more attractive than Lianxin. Perhaps this person's idea was also the idea of many people. Before leaving, everyone couldn't help but burst into dissolute laughter. Li Xiaoyu was in the crowd, so angry that his face turned red and white. He walked forward and couldn't help but slap the first person who laughed. The man's expression was shocked, and a murderous look suddenly appeared on his face. He raised his hand and grabbed Li Xiaoyu's collar at a very fast speed. Su Su, who was watching from a distance, frowned and took a step forward. Two thin water dragons behind her began to dance, windingly. She was originally just standing aside to watch the fun. Anyway, she thought that Li Xiaoyu would not be able to persuade Lianxin to come down. However, she did not expect that this group of people who were determined to leave would dare to attack Li Xiaoyu openly without leaving Bafang village. However, before Su Su could make a move, the scholar standing on the roof raised his gun and fired at the crowd in front of him. The shot happened to hit the foot of the man who was holding Li Xiaoyu's collar. The man quickly let go, took a step back, and smiled at Su Su standing under the locust tree. Okay, I won't move. We each have our own aspirations, and harmony is the most important thing. Yeah, there's no need to leave a bad impression on each other before leaving. Su Su sneered, her tone full of sarcasm. What she meant by saying this was not that she wanted to keep the peace or was afraid of getting into a fight with those who were leaving, but that she felt it was unnecessary to start a war over someone like Lianxin. She retracted the winding water dragon behind her, supported her waist, and walked forward, looking at Lianxin, who had stood up from the ground. Lianxin lowered his head and hunched his shoulders, looking like someone who didn't want to cause trouble and just wanted to leave quickly. Not far away, Mei Xingnan and a few others, dressed up in fancy clothes and long sleeves and long pants, came over and stopped to watch the fun. Su Su turned around and said to Li Xiaoyu, "Do you want to go with Lianxin?" "No, I won't leave." Li Xiaoyu answered firmly, and his attitude made it clear that he would stay in Bafang village, even if he died. So Su Su asked again, "Then, do you want to force Lianxin to stay?" Although Su Su disliked Lianxin very much, for a woman who had already lost her soul, such a woman was not threatening at all. If Li Xiaoyu was reluctant to let Lianxin go out and be abused by men, and insisted on keeping Lianxin in Bafang village, Su Su was willing to reluctantly agree to let Lianxin continue to stay in Bafang village for the sake of Li Xiuyu. Then, Lianxin was thrown to Mei Xingnan to teach her a lesson. Who would have thought that before Li Xiuyu could say anything, Lianxin seemed to be stimulated by Su Su's words. She quickly raised her head and shouted at Su Su sharply, "Who doesn't know that behind the maggot tide is the corpse tide? You said this, Su Su. It's fine if you stay here to die, but now you want to drag me with you. I don't want to. I would rather be slept on by thousands of people and ridden by tens of thousands of people than stay here to feed the maggots." Last two words, "feed the maggots," were emphasized by Lianxin. Su Su raised her eyebrows and wanted to scold Lianxin. If it weren't for Li Xiuyu, who would have the patience to keep her? Li Xiuyu turned around suddenly, stared at Lianxin, stared at her, and said word by word, "Okay, bye." Since Lianxin had said so much, there was no point in Li Xiuyu keeping her here any longer. It would be even more pointless to argue with those who were leaving for Lianxin. Li Xiuyu had said what he should say, persuaded those who should be persuaded, and made a fuss. There was nothing he could do for Lianxin anymore, so he turned around, supported Su Su, and walked back, no longer muttering about going to save Lianxin. A woman who is determined to jump into the fire pit, even if you stop her once, you can't stop her a second time. If you are so easy to kill, why do you want to trap yourself here? Why don't you retreat earlier? Just come with us. Among the departing crowd, someone deliberately dropped this sentence to Su Su, but Su Su ignored it. If these easy-to-kill maggots were not allowed to feed the bushes, how could the circle of mutated bushes outside Bafang village grow to be able to resist the tide of zombies? She and Li Xiaoyu walked to the bottom of the locust tree and saw Mei Xingnan leading a few women to watch the fun. Mei Xingnan looked sad and smiled at Su Su. Just letting these people go like this? That's really not in line with your usual style. What else? Should I persuade them to stay with all my heart, or should I use a gun to force them to stay? If they want to leave, then leave.
I won't keep these people.
Su Su shrugged, supported her waist, and walked back to her villa. Her Bafang village did not rely on the human wave tactic. In addition to the pressure on rations, Su Su did not rely on those people to guard the village. So if people wanted to leave, they could leave, and once they left, they should not come back. In fact, as things have developed to this point, Su Su thinks that everyone can see that although there are maggots outside Bafang village, there are no maggots inside Bafang village.
Why?
If you have the slightest intention of coexisting with Bafang village, you will use your brain to think about the reason. But those who were leaving, no, they never thought about why because they were panicked from the beginning. First of all, they had long been alienated, and they preconceived that Bafang village could not be defended, so they did not look at the actual situation. Why were there no maggots in Bafang village after the maggots had been there for 3 or 4 days? At this moment, they only had one thought in their minds. Bafang village was very dangerous. They had to leave as soon as possible. The life in Bafang village was too cool and dull, and there was no meaning at all. They wanted to go to the colorful world outside and fly freely. This time, Su Su promised them that there would be no maggots in Bafang village in the short term. What about next time? If they encountered any danger again, these people would be the first to abandon Bafang village. Since they have no intention of living and dying together with Bafang village, why would Su Su go to so much trouble to keep them? She walked straight into the small villa where she lived with Su's father and mother and went up to the second floor to see Yu. Yu now looked like a human-shaped piece of coke. Su Su sat at the end of the bed and touched him. Her hands were full of black ash. She sighed, sat a little further forward, and put her hand on Yu's heart. She could still clearly feel Yu's heartbeat. Su Su muttered to herself, he is already a fire-type ability user. If he evolves further, what kind of ability can he develop? Su Su also didn't know that after the end of the world, many attack-type psychics didn't like to evolve a second time. For example, fire-type psychics, whose fire-type abilities were already very strong, might just evolve into speed or strength abilities if they evolved a second time. That would be a bit of a loss. After talking to herself, Su Su sniffed the air in the room, reached out and patted Yu, who looked like charcoal, and shouted, "What on earth are you going to evolve into? Why is there a smell of barbecue in this room?" The smell of barbecue still came from Yu's body. Su Su stood up with her belly bulging and turned around a few times. She was very worried about Yu, but even though she was a 4th-level mutant, she couldn't stop Yu from evolving. What's more, Yu was already cooked. If she forcibly stopped him from evolving, Su Su would get nothing except a roasted Yu. Su Su, come down, there are guests coming. In the room, Su Su was so anxious that she didn't know what to do. In the yard, Mei Xingnan stuck her head out and called her. Su Su instantly regained her composure, looked at the human-shaped piece of charcoal lying on the bed with a heavy heart, turned around, and went downstairs. It was already dark, and several hours had passed since the group of people just left. Some left, and some came. The people who came were the women who had been detained by Li Ying and used as military comfort. In the open space, a group of women were standing in disarray, with bewildered expressions on their faces. They didn't know where they were, or how many men were waiting in line to ravage them after being sent here by Li Ying. "Mother!" A childish and crisp voice was heard. The women in the open space turned around and saw a little girl who was a little over 2 years old. She walked with short legs, wearing a clean new dress. Her hair and face were also very clean. She had 2 little pigtails with 2 small bows tied on them very thoughtfully. She ran over panting. Among the group of women, there was a woman with disheveled hair and a dirty body. She burst into tears, knelt on the ground with her hands open, waiting for the little girl to jump into her arms. The group of women burst into tears instantly. "Where are my children? Where are my children? Son, where are you? What is this place? Is my child here?" The next scene was a performance of various parent-child reunion scenes. Everyone who saw these scenes could not help but have tears in their eyes. Even Mei Xingnan, who was standing lazily on the side, could not help but lower her head and wipe her eyes. There was a thin layer of maggots outside Bafang village, and inside Bafang village, the crying was deafening. Amidst such cries, in the quietly lit room, the human-shaped charcoal lying on the bed suddenly cracked with a pop sound, and a ray of light shone through and hit the wall. The wall began to burn and smoke, and a neatly cut appeared in an instant. In the yard, Su didn't feel anything yet, but the baby in her belly suddenly moved violently. Su's face turned pale, and she stopped at the moment, bent her knees, and covered her belly with her hands, looking like she had some pain but couldn't express it. "What's wrong?" Mei Xingnan was just watching the fun, and occasionally turned her head to see Su's trembling face. She immediately jumped up, ran into the yard, supported Su, and asked, "Are you going to give birth?" "No, she kicked me so hard that it hurt my spine." Su, who was supported, pointed at her big belly. The weight of her body tilted slightly towards Mei Xingnan. She raised her foot and took a step. She felt a sharp pain in her calf. Su used all her strength to push Mei Xingnan and shouted softly, "My leg is cramping." Cramps? Mei Xingnan was a little at a loss. She was not a doctor, so how could she know how to deal with a pregnant woman with cramps? She looked around and saw Liang Xiaoqi walking over in a white nurse uniform. Mei Xingnan called her, "Liang Xiaoqi, come here quickly. Su's leg is cramping." "I wish Luo Qing a smooth test, come on."
"Ah?
Your leg is cramping? Don't move, don't fall." Hearing this, Liang Xiaoqi screamed, turned around, handed all the things in her hands to Brother Pai beside her, rolled up her sleeves and ran into Su's yard, bent down, and began to pat Su's cramped calf. Mei Xingnan, who was supporting Su, had sweat on her forehead and tried to straighten her back, fearing that she would accidentally drop Su. What the three of them didn't expect was that several golden lasers suddenly shot out from the roof of the villa behind them, all silently, without making any sound at all. "Okay, are you done?" Was squatting on the ground, patting Su's calves. She felt a little relief in Su's tense calves in her palms. Then she looked up. Su nodded with a look of weakness on her face. Liang Xiaoqi ran into the house, took out a stool for Su, and together with Mei Xingnan, helped Su sit on the stool. "Are you okay? Are you okay?"
Liang Xiaoqi asked Su again.
Su nodded and replied, "I'm fine. Thank you." Leg cramps may occur in the late stages of pregnancy. If you encounter this situation, you must stay calm and don't panic. Don't hurt the baby. "Yes, I will." Su nodded again and smiled at Liang Xiaoqi. At this time, there were already quite a few elderly people outside the yard, holding their children out to look for their mothers. Some found their mothers, and some did not. The children who found their mothers hugged their mothers and smiled, while the children who did not find their mothers, seeing that other children had mothers but they did not, cried and made a fuss, insisting on finding their mothers. A human ethical tragedy and comedy is being performed in Bafang village. After Su's legs stopped cramping, she looked at the people outside the yard, crying and laughing, and asked with some emotion, "How many women have come to Bafang village?" "Almost half of the men left in the morning, and now there are about 100 women here." All in all, the ratio of men to women in Bafang village is just balanced. The one who answered Su was Mei Xingnan. She had a very clear understanding of the population census of Bafang village. There was no need to ask what those women had experienced at the hands of Li Ying. Mei Xingnan was an experienced person, so she knew it clearly without asking. Su, who was sitting on a small stool, nodded and said to Mei Xingnan, "Since so many men have left, you and Li Xiuyu should take care of these women. I am about to give birth, and I don't ask for anything else, as long as they don't cause trouble for me." Mei Xingnan twisted her lips, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. She knew what Susu meant. If she didn't drag her feet at the critical moment and didn't make any trouble, Susu would be able to give these people a place to live. But asking her to take care of these women? Mei Xingnan felt that there were too few men in Bafang village. It was not chaotic enough, nor lively enough. She would be useless in taking care of these women. As they were talking, Li Xiaoyu walked in. After hearing what Susu said, she said, "Susu, this is what I think. Since things are already like this outside, with maggots everywhere, I think women should also pick up weapons and learn how to kill maggots so that they won't be bullied by men anymore in the future." It seems that Lian Xin's fall was a huge to Li Xiaoyu. She began to think about how women should find their own position in the apocalypse. At the beginning of the apocalypse, as long as women with courage took up weapons to kill zombies, there would be a way to survive. However, as the end of the world gradually approaches, human nature is gradually lost in this process. Regardless of whether women have the courage or not, they will be affected by this situation to a certain extent. Some of them are willing to jump into the fire pit, such as Lian Xin, and some are forced to jump into the fire pit, such as Mei Xingnan and so many women standing in the open space outside. Whether they like it or not, they all have one thing in common. They are all in the fire pit. So what role do women play in the end times? Are they just an appendage of men? Is the role of women just to comfort men? Li Xiaoyu thinks that's not the case. Men can go out and kill zombies, so why can't women? Why do men suppress the status of women to this extent? Why do everyone think that when men work hard outside and come back, women deserve to be used to warm the bed? She wants to change this social situation, and if she wants to change it, she must start from Bafang village. Pa pa pa. A loud applause rang out. Susu looked up and saw that it was Mei Xingnan who was applauding, and she was applauding towards Li Xiaoyu. Mei Xingnan clapped her hands lazily at Li Xiaoyu, then said, "Okay, I support you mentally. It's commendable that an ant is trying to shake a tree. Not bad, not bad. Come on, Li Xiaoyu. Mei Zi, don't hit her." Susu couldn't bear it and scolded Mei Xingnan. Mei Xingnan then put away the mockery in her eyes, shrugged indifferently, and walked out with her hips twisted. For someone like Mei Xingnan who is swimming in a fire pit, she is not as noble as Li Xiaoyu, nor does she think as far as Li Xiaoyu. For Mei Xingnan, survival is the top priority. But Li Xiaoyu had already made up her mind. A raging fire had already ignited in her heart. How could Mei Xingnan's 2 or 3 cold words extinguish it? Seeing the resolute look on Li Xiaoyu's face, Susu cleared her throat and asked, then, "Xiaoyu, when are you going to start training them? I'll go back and write a plan now." Li Xiaoyu was ambitious and said to Susu, who was sitting on the chair, "Susu, I'm not doing this for myself, nor am I being chased. I just want to prove one thing. Women can reproduce and fight. Haha, it's a huge project, but I support you." Susu smiled, but did not pour cold water on Li Xiaoyu like Mei Xingnan did. She was neither optimistic about Li Xiaoyu nor did she attack Li Xiaoyu at will, because Susu understood that what Li Xiaoyu was going to do was extremely difficult. This was definitely not the result of a heart. This was Li Xiaoyu's vain attempt to change the status of women in the entire human race by her own strength.
Feminist.
She also doesn't like the current apocalypse, where women are given a certain purpose. It seems that apart from comforting men and warming their beds, women have no other purpose. But if Susu is asked to do something to change the status of women, she can only applaud and encourage Li Xiaoyu like Mei Xingnan did. Speaking of Li Xiaoyu, she is also a person of action. Since she has decided to do something big and earth-shaking, she really started planning. The first issue was the placement of the 100 or so women in Bafang village. Of course, those who had children went back to their children, and those who had relatives went back to their relatives. For those who had nothing, Li Xiaoyu also arranged accommodation for them. The next day, he gathered all the women and started training on the open space. She also asked scholars to help her with how to organize the women into teams, divide them into classes, and give them some routine preliminary training in how to stand at attention and march in step. Her plan was to first strengthen the women's physical fitness. If women want to be strong in the end times, the first thing they need to do is to strengthen their bodies. When their bodies are strong, their wounded hearts will slowly be healed. When the children saw their mothers busy and serious, they also became interested. They formed small teams spontaneously and took small steps in an orderly manner. Reborned was the eldest of these children. Look at Reborned in a hurry leading a group of little kids who had just learned to walk. Some of them could not even walk steadily, but in a small corner of Bafang village, they were laughing and clapping their fists. It was so lively. After a whole day, Bafang village was bustling outside and busy inside. Then time passed quickly, and it was night. The number of maggots outside Bafang village did not decrease, and the bushes grew an inch further outside the trench, pressing down on the wall and growing outward, as if a skirting board was installed under the earth wall, which was very natural and interesting. Just as the people in the village finished a busy day and were queuing up for food, a small plane suddenly flew in the twilight sky. A small plane that can only seat 2 or 3 people. Men, women, old people, and children below, all holding rice bowls in their hands, looked up into the strong wind and looked at the small plane above their heads. The special forces standing on the rooftops immediately pointed their guns at the plane. Before they could start shooting, the window of the plane was opened, and a man wearing a helmet waved a white handkerchief at the window, shouting, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, I'm Chu Xian, requesting to land. Can we land now?"
Chu Suan?
Why is he here again? Brother Pai, who was squatting under a locust tree with a bowl of rice already served, frowned and covered his bowl, fearing that the sand and dust stirred up by the propeller would into his bowl. Seeing this, Brother Abeo, who was squatting with him, stood up and said to Brother Pai, "Brother, I'll report this to Su Su." After saying that, Brother Abeo took a bowl of rice and ran towards the villa where Su Su lived. When he called Su Su to come out, the small plane that Chu Xian was riding had already landed on a flat building far away from the open space at the entrance of Bafang village. Su Su stood in the yard, frowning and waiting for a while. She saw Chu Xian walking towards her while taking off the helmet on his head. Following Chu Xian in was a handsome guy who was 1.8 meters tall, wearing a floral short-sleeved shirt, goose yellow casual shorts, and dressed in a Hawaiian style.
Susu, let me introduce you.
This is the young master Feng Shui that I often mention to you. Before entering the yard, Chu Xian's voice started shouting. Su Su tilted her head and looked Feng Shui up and down. She happened to see Feng Shui also turned his head, and the two of them looked at each other. No interest in each other. After all, Feng Shui was the son of a wealthy family, and he had no interest in a cabbage like Su Su, especially a cabbage with such a big belly. But when he came, Chu Xian introduced this village to Feng Shui. The village chief was Su Su, a high-level water and ice dual ability user. Su Su's man was a special forces soldier with special abilities, and he had 17 other special forces soldiers as teammates. Therefore, a young girl like Su Su, in terms of martial arts, was still worthy of Feng Shui's special attention, so he walked in front of Su Su very politely, raised a hand to Su Su, squinted his peach blossom eyes slightly, and smiled charmingly. "Nice to meet you. I am Feng Shui." "Hello." Su Su stretched out her hand and shook hands politely with Feng Shui. "I am Su Su." "Su Su, where's Qiao Si? Hurry up and call Qiao Si over. Her brother is here." On the side, Chu Xian was laughing so hard that his eyes couldn't close. The smile lines at the corners of his eyes made him look several years older. Seeing that the weapons of the military cards were about to be obtained, Chu Xian seemed to be even more impatient than Feng Shui. Seeing that Su Su didn't move, he urged again. "Su Su, hurry up. Master Feng is waiting to see someone."
Who are you looking at? Qiao Si?
She left yesterday, saying she was going to Chunqing to look for young Master Feng. Su Su smiled at Chu Xian in a somewhat evil way while speaking. "I did tell her to wait in this remote place of mine, but Qiao Si didn't listen to me."
Ah?
Chu Xian was stunned. In the evening, the street lights in Bafang village lit up one by one, illuminating his stupid face. He opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. Feng Shui, who was standing next to him, frowned tightly, and glanced at Chu Xian with dissatisfaction in his charming peach blossom eyes. He must have known that they were now on someone else's territory. Although he was very dissatisfied with Su Su letting Qiao Si go, he did not say a word against Su Su. He just stared at Chu Xian with an expression as if he wanted Chu Xian to take full responsibility. But fortunately, Qiao Si felt that it would be troublesome to bring her son along on the journey, so Qiao Si's son is still with me. Do you want to see her son?
Ah?
Chu Xian opened his mouth again, and then his face was full of surprise. He happily arched his hands towards Su Su and said with a smile, "Oh, my aunt, you did a great job on this. Hurry and bring young Master Feng here." Feng Shui's face also showed an expression of satisfaction and expectation. Su Su looked at him and thought that Feng Shui was just like what Chu Xian said. He only cared about his son and was dispensable to Qiao Si. She raised her eyebrows, sneered, supported her waist, and waved to Brother Pai, who was standing outside the yard. Brother Pai had been standing outside the yard watching, so he naturally knew what Su Su meant by waving her hand. He immediately nodded, turned around, and drove to Bafang Villa to pick up Qiao Si and Feng Shui's son, Xiaoshi. This village is nice. After taking a leisurely stroll, Feng Shui, who had a figure as standard as an international model, chatted with Su Su with admiration. "You must have put a lot of thought into it." "Not much. It mainly depends on the people around me." Su Su was not being modest. If it were just her and Xiao AI today, she and Xiao AI could survive in any tide of corpses and maggots. And with Su's father and mother, that would be another way of living. And with so many people from Bafang village, the way of living would be different again. And then they lived and lived until they became what they are now. People live together as companions, and the more companions they have, the more ideas they have. Bafang village has become what it is today because everyone has one idea. Su Su plays a role in this, but not a big one. Haha, you are too modest. Feng Shui smiled very appropriately, neither advancing nor retreating, neither arrogant nor impatient, neither nor arrogant. Chu Xian, who was standing aside, had already walked into the hall behind Su Su in a familiar manner, brought out 3 wooden chairs, and asked Feng Shui and Su Su to sit down. He also sat in the yard, looked around, and asked Su Su, "Su Su, why are there no maggots here?" After a while, seeing that Su Su had no intention of answering, Chu Xian asked curiously, "We flew all the way here and found that the maggots began to radiate around the safe zone. It's strange that you didn't see any maggots in the village. We clean up diligently." Su Su raised her eyebrows and looked at Chu Xian, clearly unwilling to tell Chu Xian, so Chu Xian smiled and nodded, responding, "Yes, yes, hardworking, hardworking." Why there are no maggots in Bafang village, and why the bushes outside Bafang village grow so lushly, there must be a connection between them. Su Su was unwilling to say, so didn't Chu Xian know how to find out secretly? So he didn't ask Su Su, but just kept it in mind, waiting to slowly figure it out later. Xiaoshi is here. Outside the yard, as the car arrived, someone shouted something, and Feng Shui, who was sitting on a wooden chair, turned around and saw Brother Pai opening the car door and getting out. He then walked around to the back seat and opened the door of the trunk. A woman in a white nurse's uniform was holding a very small child in her arms, kicking the baby's feet softly in the nurse's arms. Feng Shui couldn't help but stand up and walked quickly out of the yard with the gait of a model, standing in front of Li Mingji. He opened his eyes wide and looked at his son in Li Mingji's arms, who was as big as a kitten. Li Mingji also cooperated with Feng Shui and lifted Xiaoshi in his arms outwards to make it easier for Feng Shui to see him clearly. Oh my, this guy looks exactly like Mr. Feng. It's impossible to imagine that he was brought back by mistake. Look at his small nose and eyes. He's so cute. Chu Xian, who was following behind Feng Shui, started chattering like a sparrow, while Feng Shui was still staring at the baby. Feng Shui in front of him smiled silently and seemed very happy that Chu Xian said the child looked like him. After looking at it enough, he carefully picked up the little piece of flesh from Li Mingji's arms with both hands. At this moment, The smile on his face finally lost its proper feeling and instead appeared to be more sincere. He walked back to the yard, holding his soft and plump son, and asked Su Su, "Why do you call him Xiaoshi?" "Because her mother ran away, without even giving him a name." Li Mingji spoke quickly, as if she had finally found a place to vent her dissatisfaction with Qiao Si. So her mouth was like an open faucet, and she complained about Qiao Si without mercy. On the third day after the birth, Qiao Si said she was not a cow, so she sent Gobatian to throw Xiaoshi to us. So many days have passed, and she has never visited Xiaoshi once. Even before she left, she looked as if she had no attachment to him. This child is the 10th child of our Bafang villa, so we call him Xiaoshi. Xiaoshi. Haha, Xiaoshi. Oh, so that's how you got your name. Feng Shui really liked the son. Even though his face darkened for a moment when he heard what Qiao Si had done, when he saw the little boy in his arms, he immediately put on a fatherly look and teased the child. He had already calmly examined the child in his arms. The child looked very similar to him. There was no doubt that Su Su had just picked a child to fool him. Of course, he would have to ask someone to check the DNA later, just in case. Xiaoshi had a very chubby face and was well taken care of by Bafang Villa. When he burped, he let out a smell of milk, which showed that he was not hungry. He was wearing a cotton long-sleeved shirt and long pants, which were clean and smelled fresh. He also had a cloth diaper under his ace. Bafang Villa was really particular. Even at this time, they did not forget to put a diaper on the child. All of this made Feng Shui very satisfied. He had seen too many dark ethical issues on his way from north to south. He had even seen cases where people threw crying children to the side of the road when they were fleeing because they thought the children were a burden. He had thought in his heart about what his son would become like in the end times, but now that he saw that he was better than he had imagined, he finally felt relieved. Next, it was time to talk about the remuneration. Feng Shui was very generous. He held his son and sat down on the wooden chair. After chatting with Chu Xian for a few more words, he looked at Chu Xian's expectant expression, nodded and said, "First of all, thank you and Su Su for your contribution to our Fong family. I am also grateful that you tolerated Qiao Si and allowed her to give birth to our Fong family's child. The 10 military trucks and weapons that I promised to give you will not be reduced. 10 cars." Su Su had sharp ears and caught the key point in Feng Shui's sentence. She glanced at Chu Xian. Chu Xian was embarrassed and blushed. He smiled at Su Su, fearing that Su Su would ruin his performance at this critical moment. Su Su's eyes bulged, silently revealing what she meant. Chu Xian pursed his lips and smiled embarrassedly. "He, I lied to you, he. So Su Su raised her hand towards Chu Xian, meaning, "I won the 5 army card now." Chu Xian only gave her 3 military cards when she had the weapons of 10 military trucks. This Qiao Si was received by Su Su, and the child was delivered by Su Su's people. Xiaoshi was raised so well, and it was also the people of Su Su who put in a lot of effort. What did Chu Xian do? Chu Xian was only responsible for contacting Feng Shui. So Su Su's face became stern, and she stopped comparing fingers with Chu Xian and looked at Chu Xian coldly. While Feng Shui was rambling on and on, Chu Xian smiled bitterly and gave Su Su another finger for army card. He also shook his finger, no more. Su Su rolled her eyes at Chu Xian and sat on the wooden chair without moving. She was very dissatisfied with the price, but Feng Shui was still sitting here, and it was not right for her to bargain with Chu Xian openly. So she put on a stern face and stopped talking, leaving Chu Xian to feel uneasy. Then Feng Shui said to Su Su, "The road in this end times is very difficult to travel. I have to travel from north to south, and there are many things to do. I have to take care of and weigh various aspects, so I am moving slowly. As for Qiao Si, I will send someone to look for her. I am afraid that I will have to stay in Bafang village for the next few days and bother you for a few days. You're welcome. We have quite a few houses here. But Qiao Si, you know I don't like to go back to my ex, and I don't want to see others go back to their ex. If Master Feng finds Qiao Si, don't send her to me. To avoid trouble." said the words to avoid trouble. Her tone was a little heavy, emphasizing her dislike for Qiao Si. Feng Shui pursed his lips and smiled, but said nothing. Chu Xian was beside Feng Shui, making circles and saying, "It's the end of the world now, and it's still unclear whether the person can be found. Young Master Feng is kind-hearted. Even at this time, he still sent someone to look for Qiao Si. He has done his utmost. In fact, Su, our young Master Feng has not had an easy time either. Life outside is not like your Bafeng village, and it's a mess everywhere. So if Qiao Si was found, it would be hard to tell where to send him, so they would have to send him back to Bafeng village." Of course, Chu Xian's subtext was just to leave Su with something to say afterwards. He didn't say it for sure, but just to leave some room for maneuver in the future.
Shushunari.
She thought so. Before the end of the world, the Feng family was a big force. After the end of the world, the status of this family could never be compared with that before the end of the world. They used to fly from north to south on a private plane whenever they wanted, but can they fly whenever they want now? Since Chu Xian knew that the Feng family had weapons, other military and political forces might not know about it. The weapons of Feng Shui's family were not placed in the yard and could be used at any time. At the beginning of the end of the world, it was so chaotic that the Feng family needed time to accept and adapt to deal with people from all sides who asked them for weapons. It was not that they did not have weapons, but at least they had to have the time to get them. Before getting the weapons, they had to have time to recruit soldiers. So Qiao Si was just too impatient. After she gave birth and found that Feng Shui had not come yet, she rushed to find him impatiently. No one could imagine how many twists and turns she would encounter along the way. And Feng Shui is still willing to send people out to look for Qiao Si. This man can be regarded as a man of affection and righteousness. At least he did not turn his back on Qiao Si when she was being delicate and pretentious after giving birth. So as for what will happen after we find Qiao Si, we'll talk about it when the time comes. Feng Shui wanted to stay in Bafeng village for the time being, so Su let them stay. In the second half of the night, another plane arrived in Bafeng village. It was much larger than the previous small plane. 10 people with special abilities and 2 timid confinement nannies walked out of the plane. These 2 confinement nannies were selected by the Feng family to take care of Xiaoshi. Since Feng Shui was going to stay in Bafeng village, and the environment in Bafeng village was much better than outside, it was only natural to send the confinement nannies to Bafeng village. As for the weapons of the 10th military card, Feng Shui did not mention when they would be delivered, and Su did not ask. Chu Xian was a little anxious, fearing that Feng Shui would run away on a plane in the middle of the night. So before dawn the next day, he rushed to the villa where Su lived and waited for Su to wake up. Because Bafeng village was surrounded by maggots recently, Su got up early and yawned as she went downstairs. She found Chu Xian sitting at her table, eating breakfast and drinking porridge with Su's father and mother, so Su snorted and said indifferently, "Liar, you come to cheat me out of my porridge again." "Oh, I'm not forced to do this." Chu Xian looked embarrassed. Seeing that Su's father and mother were silent, he stood up, moved a chair for Su, and explained. "At that time, I said Feng Shui would only give me 6 military cards, but I was also afraid that he would not be able to redeem 1 military card, and we would be happy for nothing, right? I said a smaller number, thinking that if Feng Shui could not redeem 1 military card, I would at most compensate you with 2 military cards. Haha, I did this all for you. Well, after all, it's all for her." Su didn't want to argue with this old fox about the matter of Jijun Ka and Jijun Ka. She sneered, sat on the chair, greeted her parents, and said to Chu Xian, "Tell me, why did you come to see me this morning?" "I just came here to explain to you why this 6 army card became a 10 army card. Su, we are very good partners, and I am very sincere."
To be honest.
"Okay, tell me the truth." Chu Xian wiped his face and instantly changed his sincere apology face into a shrewd and calculating expression and said to Su, "Before Feng Shui's military card arrives, you can no longer let Feng Shui go like you let Qiao Si go. If he wants to leave, I can't force him to stay. If he leaves, our weapons will be wasted. Well, the most I can do here is to watch him. If he really wants to leave, what can I do to stop him? Beat him up? Detain him and ask the Fong family for weapons? When Su Su thought about it, she felt that the matter had become extremely complicated. Fong Shui was a man with unfathomable scheming, and there might be countless armed forces supporting him behind the scenes. She was about to give birth and did not want to cause any more trouble. It would be great if we could get the weapons, but what if Fong Shui breaks his promise? When the time comes, just stop them. The 18 special forces from Bafong village may be able to deal with the 10 superpowers around Fong Shui. Don't worry, as long as you stop them, I will make sure that the Fong family will fulfill their promise. But I don't feel motivated. Not only do I have to take care of someone else's son, but I also have to waste manpower to fight someone else's superpowers. In the end, the weapons of the 4 armies were divided. I was the one who did the hard work, the one who shed blood and sweat, and in the end, I only got a small share. What a loss. What Su Su said to Chu Xian was all the truth. She was definitely not pretending. She felt that she was at a disadvantage no matter how she thought about it, as she was unwilling to cooperate with Chu Xian to arrest people because of such a small weapon that made her go to war and make enemies. Chu Xian had a big expression on his face, saying stingy. He squinted at Su Su and said helplessly, "Then I'll give you 10 more boxes of crystal cores? 1 box is this big." As he spoke, Chu Xian compared the size of the box he mentioned to Su Su. Su Su glanced at Chu Xian, nodded, and agreed to let Chu Xian keep the person. In fact, Su Su didn't need to keep anyone here deliberately, because Fong Shui had no plans to leave Bafong village in the short term. He was a man who walked from north to south, and he understood the outside environment much better than Xiao Si, who had always been well protected. Such a small Bafong village was actually the most stable and cleanest gathering place for survivors he had ever seen along the way. Fong Shui had no plans to leave Bafong village until his uncle had completely taken control of Chunqing. Chu Xian's concerns were completely unnecessary. After having breakfast with Chu Xian, Su's father went to continue his unfinished defense project, Su's mother went to harvest and plant rice and vegetables, and Chu Xian went to Fong Shui's place, intending to chat with Fong Shui, to keep in touch, and to narrow the distance between them. The special forces with superpowers in the village are still on guard and patrolling on the rooftops. The 10 superpowers brought by Fong Shui only protect their young Master Fong and young Master Fong, so like Gu Baitian's group of bodyguards, they do not walk around the village on weekdays. Su Su was planning to go up to the watchtower to see what was going on. Before she walked out of the yard, she heard someone screaming in front of her. There was another commotion. Su Su hurried out of the yard. The women who had been exercising in an orderly manner in the open space now ran into the village in panic. Su Su looked up and saw a white pillar erected behind the 2 villas. On the pillar, the huge, bright red mouth parts were stirring, and saliva was dripping down in globs. Because Bafong village was well prepared, ever since Su Su had fought off a very large and thick maggot, the special forces with superpowers in Bafong village had been waiting for the maggot to appear every day. This time it finally came, and before Su Su could react, several superpowers rushed towards the white maggot from multiple directions and corners. This big white maggot has a waist as thick as 4 or 5 people hugging together, and its upper body is taller than a telephone pole. It seems to have come specifically to destroy the mutated bushes outside Bafong village. Under its white body, many legs are wriggling, and its thick waist is resting on the earth wall, and its head is raised up to try to climb onto the roof in front. The earth wall was crushed a little, and the back half of its body fell directly into the trench. However, perhaps because of its high level, the thorns of the mutant bushes had difficulty penetrating its flesh. But the thorns still pierced its body. When the maggot was trying to enter Bafong village, many scratches were clearly visible on its abdomen. It should have been pierced by the roots of the mutant bushes underground when it was squirming. When it was crawling out, it directly cut long cuts, revealing the white protein inside, just like egg white. Moreover, the level of this maggot is indeed very high. The cuts on its abdomen are healing at a speed visible to the eye. When Su Su saw the wounds that were about to heal, she stretched out her hands forward. Two white cold lights shot out from her palms and hit the thick white maggot, freezing it instantly. Fortunately, she was able to freeze it, which meant that the maggot was at most level 3. However, before Su Su could feel lucky, the thick white maggot fell straight down on the villa, pressing the roof of the villa down in the middle. The maggot's hind half arched and raised its frozen upper body. Many psychics then madly released their superpowers towards the maggot. After a while, the maggot twisted and fell from the side of the villa and hit the ground, stirring up countless dust. The second half of its life curled up and swept across, sweeping down a large section of the earth wall. At this time, several superpowers still did not stop the attack. The maggot's hind half swept and swept, destroying the earth wall and the vegetable garden. Then it curled up its hind half a few times and finally died under all kinds of messy superpowers. But this was not the end, but a beginning. As the huge maggot swept down the earth wall and pressed down on the mutated bushes, the small maggots outside Bafang village finally had a breakthrough. They used the big maggots as a bridge and pushed their way into Bafang village while eating the bodies of the big maggots. At this time, it is time for the chickens to show their power. When the special forces with special powers are ready to deal with the little maggots that have rushed into Bafang village, a group of organized and well-organized chickens come over, cackling. The little chickens eat the small maggots, and the big chickens eat the big maggots. Some chickens couldn't get the maggots to eat, so they simply spread their wings, flew out of Bafang village, and ran outside the trench to feast on the maggots. Haha, this Bafang village is really a magical place. Feng Shui, who was standing on the roof of a villa, looked at the scene that had just appeared with admiration, turned around and said to Chu Xian, who was standing behind him, "This crisis has been resolved just like that. Now there is nothing for the superpowers to do. The role of the psychic and Su Su is to deal with the big maggots that break in to clear the way." According to Chu Xian, when the chickens grow big enough, they can be killed and eaten in order to control the spread of mutant chickens. So, isn't Bafang village a magical place? Chu Xian behind him also responded with a smile. Indeed, Su Su is a very wonderful person. Nowadays, people outside don't have the leisure time to take care of these things, let alone turn them into a small world. Only Su Su is willing to spend time and effort to do it bit by bit. The simplest example is like the mutated maggots and the mutated chickens. If you separate them, both are harmful and enough to cause humanity to be besieged. But for Su Su, this has become a food chain that feeds humanity. Feng Shui nodded with admiration on his face, but he didn't mean to be greedy. After the admiration, he felt a little regretful and commented with Chu Xian, "It's good, but the place is a little small. It's only suitable for a woman like Su Su to play around. It's just like playing. Master Feng, you think this place is too plain and peaceful." Chu Xian could roughly figure out Feng Shui's thoughts. At this time, Feng Shui's uncle had brought his soldiers to Chuncheng, and Feng Shui stayed in Bafang village. With nothing to do, his mind became active, so Chu Xian said to Feng Shui, "Actually, speaking of Bafang village, it's not all clear. I heard there's a beauty here."
Oh.
Stunning. It was obvious that when he heard the word beauty, he was much more interested in it than other things. But he was a romantic man, without being. Feng Shui looked down upon the prostitutes on the streets of Chuncheng. He always pursued high-level enjoyment. Spiritual pleasure could satisfy Feng Shui more than physical pleasure. Chu Xian understood this, so when he saw Feng Shui's interested expression, he stepped forward and said to him, "In this Bafang village, there is a woman named Mei Xingnan, whose appearance can be regarded as the most beautiful in the world. It is said that she had a rough life before, but it is better not to mention it. After coming to Bafang village, she originally wanted to do the flesh trade to make a living, but Su Su did not let her. She directly set a price for Mei Xingnan, 100,000 crystal cores, to invite her for a meal. Mr. Feng, are you interested?" Feng Shui smiled, with an air of being better than nothing. Chu Xian didn't need to ask any more questions about this. Feng Shi had previously thought that Bafang village was some kind of place of dragons and tigers, but after coming here, he discovered that in this apocalypse, there was no other place where life could be more comfortable than this simple Bafang village. It seems that he neither acted like a hooligan towards Mei Xingnan nor sought any benefit from Bafang village. The 100,000 crystal cores were just there to entertain himself and kill time in these boring days. Looking at Su Su again. After killing the big maggot, Su Su supported her waist and walked to the direction where the big maggot fell. Looking at the extremely disgusting scarlet mouthparts, Su Su frowned. An ice rope flew out of her hand and stretched into the scarlet mouthparts, stirring a few times. When the rope slowly retracted, it rolled out an oval crystal core as big as a thumb. After a while, another group of chicks came and followed the mother hen. They jumped onto the dead maggot and began to peck at it and eat it. Looking at the tail of the big maggot, the end that was not frozen had already been eaten by the small maggots. Several big roosters and hens with iron claws and sharp beaks were pecking at the small maggots, and the area where the chickens and maggots were scattered was a mud wall with a big hole in it. The wall that Sue's father had built was originally made of excess soil piled up when the trench was dug. Although some stones were added later, it was still too fragile to withstand any attack. Now that the earth wall of the entire Bafang village had just been completed, a giant maggot revealed its shoddy quality. Father Su, who was watching from afar, had an inexplicable look on his face. Without needing anyone else to say anything, he immediately called over Gotzi, an Earth-type mutant, and asked Gotzi to get a big rock to temporarily block the gap. There are not as many coolies in Bafang village now as before. Many men have run away, including the soldiers in the 4 carts at the beginning and the survivors who came later. So now, let Sue's father consolidate the earth wall outside Bafang village. The project will become even more massive. He thought about it and decided that the defense work of Bafang village could not be stopped. After the incident where the earth wall was crushed by the giant maggots, he had to urge the remaining laborers to continue to consolidate the wall. However, all the building material stores in Bafang village have been emptied in the past few months, and the cement and construction glue that were found have been used for other purposes, such as repairing reservoirs and building bridges over trenches. Gotzi's earth-based ability can release a large piece of stone at once, but he often needs to absorb crystal cores for a long time before he can release the second large stone. If we rely on Gotzi to consolidate the wall, the efficiency will be too slow. There are a few Earth-type mutants with relatively low abilities in Bafang village now, but faced with such a huge wall project as Bafang village, it is impossible to reinforce the wall in the short term. Father Su was so anxious that he stood in front of a group of chickens, terrified that if a few more maggots that big came, the wall that Bafang village had spent so much time building would be in vain. A few maggots could knock down the entire wall. Dad, don't be too impatient. We have to do things step by step. All problems need time to be solved. Su Su, who was standing by, couldn't bear to see her father racking his brains to come up with a solution, so she advised, "It's certain that the maggots will come back. I think now everyone in the village should stop moving alone. Everyone should try to move away from the outer wall and live together." Bafang village is very large. Su Su had never cared about the soldiers and survivors before. He just let them choose the house they liked to live in. Because the scenery outside Bafang village is particularly beautiful and it is convenient for the soldiers and survivors to go to work on weekdays, most of the coolies choose to live next to the earth wall. But it is obvious that this house needs to be changed now. The place near the earthen wall is not safe at all. A level 3 maggot can easily run over the earthen wall and rush into Bafang village with the little maggots. If the chickens in Bafang village do not rescue in time, the people living near the earthen wall will be in danger. Susu. At this moment, a male voice sounded behind Susu. Susu was persuading her father not to worry. When she heard someone calling her, she turned around and saw the scholar standing behind him. Compared with other Special Forces soldiers, the scholar's fair face had a humble expression. He recommended himself to Susu. "Can I give it a try?" "You, Miss Type?" Father Su didn't quite understand. The scholar's ability was fog, which was a white, light mist. They were trying to strengthen the wall, so what could the scholar's fog do? Dad, don't worry, listen to what the scholar has to say. Although Su didn't know what the scholar's mist could do, she knew a 4th-level mist ability user in her previous life. Not only could the mist in his hand be retracted and released freely, but it could also be condensed into mist blades that appeared inexplicably and suddenly disappeared. It was simply a powerful weapon for killing people and stealing treasures. So don't look down on fog. As long as the scholar makes good use of it, it is entirely possible for him to become a dark horse that surpasses other types of superpowers. Then the scholar smiled at Su and took out a glass bowl. At the bottom of the bowl was a layer of white maggots the size of rice grains. It was a thin layer, and there were not many of them. In fact, as I get older, I am no longer as angry as I used to be. When I wrote books before, I always thought that I wrote the best and would not listen to any opinions. Now I think that it is very good that someone can calmly write so many words for me in the book review section and explain the reasons one by one. So as for the details that are indeed problematic, I will change them if I can, but the overall situation cannot be changed. The foreshadowing for the later parts will have to be improved in the next book. Some time ago, didn't you get an ice bowl in Bafong Villa and raise maggots in it for a while? The scholar looked at Su's silly expression and thought that Su must have forgotten about this matter a long time ago. He did not tell Su how these maggots forgotten by Su ended up in his hands. The scholar told Su the result directly. In order to control these maggots, I discovered my mist system, which has a very good advantage. As he spoke, the scholar waved his hand into the glass bowl, and the transparent glass bowl was filled with white mist. The crystal-clear container and the misty white smoke made the scene in the bowl appear inexplicably magnificent. Su was still wondering when she had found an ice bowl in Bafong Villa and raised maggots in it. As she was thinking, she suddenly felt bad and said to the scholar with shame, "I'm sorry, I almost caused a disaster. I remember that I seemed to have raised maggots. At that time, why did Su raise maggots? Oh, to feed her mutant bushes." She looked down at her big belly in silence. What happened to her? She actually brought the maggots into Bafong Villa and forgot about them inside Bafong Villa. Fortunately, the scholar discovered it in time. Otherwise, if the maggots spread and became a disaster, and there were so many elderly people and babies in Bafong Village, wouldn't she have killed all of them? Yes, you did. The scholar looked at Su, who had a silly expression on her face, but didn't blame her. He just continued, "Then I found that these maggots completely lost their sense of direction in my fog. They seemed to be trapped in some kind of dilemma, and most of them stopped moving." As he spoke, the scholar raised the glass bowl in his hand and showed the bottom to Su and Su's father. Sure enough, the little maggots that were originally crawling at the bottom of the bowl and trying to break through the glass bowl all stopped wriggling in the scholar's mist and stayed there stupidly, as if they didn't know where to go. The speed of their body movements also seemed to slow down a lot, and they looked even more stupid than Su. Why is that? Father Su bent over and stood under the bowl held high by the scholar. He looked up with a serious expression, as if he was studying why the maggots were not moving. He asked the scholar, but the scholar didn't know either. He just shrugged and guessed, perhaps some ionization reaction in the fog blocked the transmission of some mysterious medium between them, causing them to be unable to find the group and lose the guidance of the large group, so they don't know what to do next. Does your mist work on humans too? Su tilted her head and asked. She probably understood what the scholar meant. If a person suddenly entered a vast expanse of white fog, he would feel a little lost in his directions. She didn't know if other people had had such an experience, but Su often had this feeling. When she closed her eyes, she could feel whether there was someone around her. She could also feel if someone was walking or running. If she was in a large group of people, she would often follow the group. For example, after watching a movie, if she followed the group, she would definitely be able to find the exit. If a person enters a thick fog, he would be afraid to move forward. This is called loss of direction. The scholar's fog is probably released by his supernatural powers, which emphasizes the sense of direction. This is also the most important reason why the maggots in the fog stopped wriggling. After hearing this, The scholar hesitated for a moment, and then told Su Su honestly, if it is within a small range, it may be useful for humans, but my current ability level is not high. At most, the fog barrier I create can only float over the trench, and it is only a distance from the entrance of Bafong village. If I want to surround the entire Bafong village with a circle of fog, it is a bit difficult for someone of my level. That's enough. All supernatural powers require diligent practice to be advanced. Su Su squinted and smiled, and did not have high expectations for the scholar. Speaking of the scholar's supernatural power level, he might be the one with the lowest level among the 18 special forces. It has been so long since the end of the world, and his fog-type supernatural power level has only reached the second level, and this second level was reached when he was in the city. At that time, there was no water system in the Special Forces team, so when they were thirsty, they asked the scholars to make fog for them, and they would stick out their tongues pitifully to feel the moistness in the air, so as to quench their thirst. Later, Yu found Su Su, and the Special Forces team with superpowers no longer needed to be so tight, so the scholar was asked to release the fog to quench his thirst. The scholar's superpowers were rarely used. If it weren't for the last time when he tried to control Li Xiuyu's love scent, he would have thought that his superpowers were useless. Therefore, the scholar, who rarely used his fog power, became the person with the lowest level of power in the Special Forces. However, it is impossible to achieve 100% defensive effect by using the scholar's fog to surround the earth wall. At most, it can prevent the maggots outside from swarming into Bafong village. If there's a gap, someone must be posted to guard the gap to eliminate the maggots that have already crawled in or have come in by accident. And the mutated bushes destroyed by the big maggots in the trench must be given time to grow again. This also requires a special person to clean up the maggots in time for these young bushes that have not yet grown strong. From now on, the scholar will be the one guarding the outer defense line of Bafong village. In the village, it has been decided that scholars will prevent the maggots from entering through the gap. Su's father and several other Earth-type ability users have also begun the project of consolidating the Earth wall. Li Xiaoyu continued to train more than 100 women. A few days ago, she divided these women into 10 small classes. The 10 small classes will take turns patrolling in Bafong village within 24 hours a day. Encouraged by Li Xiaoyu, each of the women seemed to have gained infinite courage and were full of expectations for the future, so they trained very seriously and patrolled very diligently. As for the issue of internal security in Bafong village, gradually it seemed that the men in Bafong village had nothing to do with it. Those who were not optimistic about Li Xiaoyu and believed that the greatest use of women in the apocalypse was to provide bodies for men's entertainment found it very boring, but fortunately Su Su has always encouraged them. Everyone needs to discover their own value and make good use of it. Just when everything was proceeding in an orderly and steady manner, a box of crystal cores was carried into the laundry room by Feng Shi's 2 psychic bodyguards. Under the scorching sunlight, the box was placed heavily in front of Mei Xingnan. The 2 psychic bodyguards bent down, bowed politely to Mei Xingnan, and then opened the lid of the box in front of all the onlookers. A box full of crystal cores, far more than 100,000 in number, lay inside the box, like fine gems, shining brightly in the sunlight. Even so, she was born with a charming look, and even without a bit of makeup on her face, she could give people a scent of heavy rouge. A box of crystal cores was placed in front of her. The women around her all screamed in exaggeration, but Mei Xingnan seemed to have no interest. She glanced lazily, smiled indifferently, and said to the 2 bodyguards who brought in the crystal cores, "Master Feng is very generous." As soon as our eldest master came to Bafong village, he heard of Miss Mei's great name. He said that beauties in troubled times always make people pity and feel sorry for them. A man with a beautiful woman is enough to move people. In order to get to know Miss Mei, we specially held a banquet at our mansion today. I wonder if Miss Mei would be willing to honor us and give our eldest master some face. The mansion? Actually, it was just a small country villa. Everyone couldn't help but laugh at the bodyguard's flowery words. Then, listening to the rest of what the bodyguard said, they were actually very polite and respectful to Mei Xingnan, as if they were used to chasing girls for Feng Shui and seemed particularly skilled. This is true love, Maisie. Why don't you agree to it quickly? Someone around Mei Xingnan sourly urged her to agree to it. To be honest, they would never encounter such a thing. If they did, they would definitely agree to it and follow the bodyguards back on the spot. How could they be like Mei Xingnan, still lazily putting on airs? Aren't you afraid that Master Fong will be unhappy? Look at these crystal cores. These are all Fong Shui's sincerity. True love. Mei Xingnan, who was encouraged to quickly accept Fong Shui's invitation, couldn't help but turn her head to look at the jealous women around her. She snorted with some ridicule. What she didn't want to say was that don't think that Fong Shui's offering of crystal cores far exceeding 100,000 is true love. This kind of rich kid is just playing a process, and the result is actually similar to soliciting prostitution. They just like excitement, challenges, and the pleasure of conquering women. But in this world, men are not the only ones who like to conquer women. Sometimes the situation can be reversed. Mei Xingnan decided to have some fun with Fong Shui. She stood up straight, stepped forward, and walked around the box of crystal cores on the ground with graceful steps. She was extremely beautiful, and her smile was so seductive that people dared not to blaspheme easily. She said to the two bodyguards, "Then I would like to thank Master Fong for his kindness. Please report this to Master Fong for me. We will see you there." Ha ha ha. Yes, yes, yes. The bodyguards bowed and retreated with smiles on their faces. They were very satisfied with Mei Xingnan's understanding. It seemed that Mei Xingnan was a character. She was not pretentious, nor did she feel that she was being insulted by Fong Shui, nor was she so proud that she thought she had found true love in the world. This woman was indeed a stunner, as Chu Xian said. I believe that their young Master Fong can have a great time in Bafong village. Maisie, who do you think this young Master Fong is? You are so lucky. Master Fong is willing to spend so many crystal cores on you. It shows his sincerity. Maisie, should we call you Mrs. Fong from now on? How stupid. What's Mrs. Fong? She's a generation apart. You should call her Madam Fong. Uft, it seems like I'm watching a national drama. Amid the chatter, Mei Xingnan frowned and stood beside the box of crystal cores. She kicked the box with her toes and said to two of the women, "There are many internal and external troubles in Bafong village right now. Send this box of crystal cores to Su Su. She can use it."
Why?
One woman was not happy. She stiffened her neck and looked like she was blaming Mei Xingnan. This was given to you by Master Fong. You just gave it to Su Su so casually. Isn't it a waste of Master Fong's love? Infatuated. Mei Xingnan's expression was full of sarcasm. She took 2 steps forward, looked at the woman who had refuted her, and said seriously, "I thought you had experienced the end of the world and would understand men a little better. But judging from what happened today, you are still as naive as before the end of the world." She glanced at all the women in front of her, turned around, and continued with a graceful and charming figure. "Fong Shui and I have never met each other. He gave me this box of crystal cores, not because of love at first sight, nor secret admiration. This kind of novel plot is impossible in reality. He just wanted to say that he could afford the price and hoped that I could be worth it. Regarding the games between men and women, some are straightforward and direct, some are slow and circuitous, and some are ambiguous. It all depends on how the man chooses and what he wants from the woman. A night of passion is the most basic way to have fun. A man and a woman, after the money and goods are settled, they go their separate ways the next day. The man just wants to enjoy the pleasure of his lower body. It is obvious that Fong Shui is not looking for a one-night stand with Mei Xingnan. He is an expert in playing games between men and women. A man like this will never lack women who will throw themselves at him, whether before or after the end of the world. For him, women are too easy to get, so Fong Shui has no interest in continuing. He is romantic, but definitely not. A romantic man is more dangerous to a woman than a man. A man only hurts a woman's body, but a romantic man hurts a woman's heart. But it was obvious that Mei Xingnan's words were not taken to heart by the other women. It was true that they had experienced the baptism of the end of the world and had been severely tortured physically by a group of despicable men, but women have always been emotional, and when their lives became a little more stable, they began to yearn for love. Seeing those women with non-committal expressions on their faces, Mei Xingnan said nothing more. She just turned around and invited them to play mahjong. As soon as she left, Su Su just woke up from a nap and saw Zhou Xiaolin came in with a child at her arms and said loudly to Su Su, "Su Su, something happened." What happened again? Now, whenever Su Su saw Zhou Xiaolin, she felt a little irritated. She couldn't understand why Zhou Xiaolin had time to stare at Mei Xingnan when the maggots were surrounding the Bafang village. Sure enough, every time Zhou Xiaolin came to Su Su, she was here to complain about Mei Xingnan. She didn't see the annoyance on Su Su's face. She just held her daughter in her arms and said to Su Su, "Do you know? This morning, the new young master Fong in our village actually asked his bodyguards to carry hundreds of thousands of crystal cores to invite Mei Xingnan to dinner?"
Oh.
TSK, I didn't expect that Mei Xingnan's method of seducing men is quite powerful. There are actually people who spend hundreds of thousands of crystal cores just to have a meal with her. Did Mei Xingnan agree? How could she not agree? If it were me, I would agree too. Zhou Xiaolin's expression was hard to tell whether it was jealousy or sarcasm. Anyway, her words were a bit sour. Her husband was an ordinary person, and she was also an ordinary person. Crystal core? She had never seen one. Now that she followed Su Su, she was lucky to have a full meal in Bafang village. She was not as shameless as Mei Xingnan to earn this kind of crystal core. It was useless for ordinary people in Bafang village to have crystal cores. I say, if you have nothing to do, play with the children more. This Bafang village is not big or small, and you can find a few parenting books. If you have nothing to do after eating, you might as well join Li Xiaoyu's women's self-improvement team and practice your physical strength. Impatient to listen to Zhou Xiaolin's words, Su Su walked out of the yard. She thought Zhou Xiaolin was just idle. She didn't have a smooth life yet, but she was meddling in other people's affairs. Out of curiosity, he spent hundreds of thousands of crystal cores to invite Mei Xingnan to dinner. She could afford the price and was willing to pay the price. What did it have to do with Zhou Xiaolin? Why was she jealous? Su Su walked out of the yard, holding her waist, and looked at a group of women marching in the open space, and another group of women running around the edge of the open space. Su Su walked directly towards the watchtower. There were still the same number of maggots outside, but the mutated bushes outside the earth wall had grown a good distance out of the trench and were so lush that they were about half the height of the earth wall. Some of the bushes had changed from their original lush green color to purple and green. Su Su had sharp eyes and saw that a lush green branch had actually stretched out from the bushes near the gate. At the top of the branch, there was a green bud. It seemed that this mutant bush had eaten enough recently and was preparing to upgrade. But I didn't know what this bud would be when it grew up. Su Su had a vague impression in her mind, but there were so many strange species in the world that it was too early for her to say that this bud would upgrade into a man-eating plant that could actively forage for food. Being a little cautious, Su Su asked the people on the watchtower to keep an eye on the bud at all times and to notify her at any time if they saw the bud open. Because the mature piranha plant will actively look for food, and the stem can twist on its own. If you are not careful, it may take the principle of proximity and eat the two supernatural beings on duty on the watchtower quietly. But if this bud is removed now, it is a bit of a pity. If it is really a piranha plant, Su Su can transplant it outside the trench when it is still very fragile, far away from Bafang village, and even open up a piece of open space to feed this piranha plant. This can be considered as adding some attack methods to Bafang village. Full of expectations for the piranha plant, Su Su walked down from the watchtower in a good mood. Before she walked under the locust tree, she saw King Kong holding a ultrasound form, smiling silly as he walked along with his head down. When he saw Su Su walking over with a bulging belly, King Kong smiled, raised his hand and greeted Su Su, saying silly, "Hi, Su Su, look, this is my baby. Congratulations." Su Su smiled sincerely, then changed her mind and decided that she would not go there now and should go siege with Shijiao instead. So she supported her waist and walked towards the clinic behind King Kong with her belly bulging. As she walked, she kept looking back at King Kong. King Kong had such a bright smile on his face, and he held up the ultrasound report in his hand to show off to everyone he met. He was indeed very happy to have a child. When we entered the clinic, Zhuo Shijia was lying on the sofa. Junjiu, who was beside him, pushed out an oxygen tank for emergency treatment, intending to give Zhuo Shijia some oxygen. Zhuo Shijia, looking pale, shook his hand and said to Junjiu, "Don't waste oxygen. Save it for others."
How can that be?
"It's very dangerous for you to be like this." Junjiu disagreed, but still pushed the oxygen tank over, holding a sky-blue tube in his hand, and handed it to Zhuo Shijia. Seeing Su Su coming in, Junjiu opened the oxygen tank and said to Su Su, "Su Su, are you here for a prenatal checkup? I'll be done soon." "No hurry, just do your thing." Looking at Zhuo Shijia's pale face and the happy King Kong just seen, the two people's emotions are obviously completely contradictory. Su Su knows that Zhuo Shijia didn't tell the truth to King Kong at all. The baby in her belly needs to be protected. How long can you keep it a secret? Su Su sighed, sat on the sofa, and looked at Zhuo Shijia with a frown. Zhuo Shijia was leaning back on the sofa, with both hands on her forehead, one hand holding an oxygen tank, breathing in. After hearing what Su Su said, she said in a muffled voice, "I was planning to have an abortion, but now I'll keep it a secret until after you give birth. You're already 8 months pregnant, and I can't make any mistakes." "What do you mean? What mistakes will you make?" Hearing Zhuo Shijia say this, Su Su suddenly had a bad feeling in her heart. She asked Zhuo Shijia, but Zhuo Shijia closed his mouth and didn't want to answer. So Su Su looked at Junjiu, who looked embarrassed, but under Su Su's insistence, Junjiu still said, "Su Su, Dr. Zhuo's child won't last long. Just now, I was examining Dr. Zhuo and discussing the abortion when King Kong suddenly barged in. We couldn't hide it, so we told King Kong that Dr. Zhuo was pregnant. Otherwise, we would never have told King Kong about it. I started bleeding as soon as I got pregnant. If this happened before the end of the world, I would have just laid quietly in bed for maybe 7 or 8 months. If I had followed the doctor's advice, taken medicine well, and rested well, I could have grown the baby in my belly. But there's a chance that I might have a premature birth, and premature babies have to be put in an incubator. But now is the end of the world, and women in the end of the world are not suitable for giving birth to children. The question of whether to keep the child in Zhuo Shijia's belly is not whether to keep it or not, but whether it can be kept at all. If it is saved reluctantly, it will probably be a premature birth. But where can we get an incubator in Bafang village now? Besides, if you want to preserve the pregnancy, there is no oxygen and no medicine. How can you preserve the pregnancy? Preserving the pregnancy is not just about lying in bed. Abortion was possible, but when Zhuo Shijia and Junji were discussing a time to have an abortion, King Kong saw them. Seeing King Kong looking as happy as a child, he ran out with the ultrasound report to show off. Later, there was no chance to talk to King Kong about abortion. "Hey, you want an incubator?" Su Su stood up with her belly bulging and frowning, and said to Zhuo Shijia, "You should have told me earlier that you wanted an incubator, and I'll ask King Kong to give it to you." For Su Su, she was perhaps like King Kong, and had never thought that Zhuo Shijia would finally decide to abort the baby in her belly. Su Su felt that aborting a child was inconsistent with her current beliefs. "Oh, how can you be so decisive? We are afraid that you will do this. 1 or 2 of you will do this." Junju stepped forward, helped Su Su sit back on the sofa, and explained patiently, "Let's not talk about the medicines and equipment needed to preserve the fetus. To preserve a premature baby, not only an incubator is needed, but also many other equipment. The key problem is Dr. Zhuo's physical condition. She can't have a baby at all." After a pause, Junjo glanced at Zhuo Shijia and seemed to feel that what he said was a bit cruel to Zhuo Shijia, so he continued, "Let's take a step back and say that the child can be kept alive until the day of premature birth, but now there is a doomsday virus everywhere and premature babies will not be completely safe even if they stay in an incubator. Su Su, you're about to give birth, and the most important thing for all of us to do now is to ensure that the baby in your belly can be safely delivered. According to the order of treatment, Susu's child was born before Zhuoshizha's child, and the possibility of survival is much greater than the child in Zhuoshizha's belly, so all rescue forces should be given priority to Susu. Only after Susu gives birth will they consider how to save the child in Zhuoshizha's belly. For example, when certain disasters occur, of course the one with the highest chance of survival will be rescued first. Only when there is excess strength will we go back to rescue those with lower chances of survival. Otherwise, all medical resources will be used to rescue those with lower chances of survival, and in the end the person being rescued will not be saved, and the one with a higher chance of survival will be delayed. As a result, both lives were lost. It was also because of the current situation in Bafang village. Seeing that Susu was about to give birth, Zhuoshizha did not want to cause any trouble, so she decided to abort the baby, and therefore did not tell King Kong about this matter at the beginning. And now, if King Kong knew that he had a child and needed all kinds of equipment to preserve the fetus, she was afraid that he would no longer care about the situation outside Bafang village, and would desperately drag the special forces out to find medicine and incubators to preserve the fetus. Then, Susu was the only one left in Bafang village with a big belly, and she had to take care of the safety of the whole village, young and old. Although Susu was a 4th-level psychic, she was also a woman who was about to give birth. So things have developed to this point. Zhuoshizha had finally made up her mind. She decided to abort the child she had been waiting for, but because King Kong knew about it, she had to put the matter off. She wanted to wait until Susu gave birth, and then tell King Kong about preserving the fetus. As long as she could wait and the child in her belly could wait, perhaps there was still a chance. Susu sat on the sofa in silence, looking at Zhuoshizha's pale face. A very uncomfortable feeling spread in her heart. She felt as if she owed Zhuoshizha a huge favor. From the bottom of her heart, Susu felt that things shouldn't be like this. It's the end of the world. Who can really be responsible for whom? When everyone is capable, they stay together to help each other and get through the crisis together. But when a crisis that cannot be solved comes, they really can't take care of each other. Of course, they should go their separate ways and take care of themselves. For example, Zhuoshizha now, since there is a possibility of saving the child, she wants to save it herself. If it were Susu, she would naturally not think so much and would just instruct King Kong to find medicine and equipment. But Zhuoshizha thought differently from Susu. Zhuoshizha was different from Susu. She and Junjiu were right. Bafang village was in trouble both internally and externally. Now it was definitely inseparable from the protection of the 18 special forces. If King Kong knew the truth now and immediately took people out to find equipment, what would Susu do? Susu definitely couldn't handle such a big village. But why did Susu want to take care of such a big village? She was the village chief, but that was the title everyone called her. In a critical moment, she could only take care of the whole village. She couldn't take care of the whole village, so of course, she only needed to think about how to protect her family. Now that Junjiu said this, it seemed as if they trusted her so much and thought that she was so kind-hearted that she would definitely consider the overall situation in a crisis and support the safety of the entire Bafang village alone. Susu didn't realize until now that she had been deified by these people. According to Junjiu and Zhuoshizha's understanding, everyone is now in the same boat, and this boat is steered by Susu. All of them are considering Susu, because Susu is now taking care of the entire ship. Although Susu herself does not feel it, everything she does, every detail, proves that she has tried her best and has devoted all her energy to the whole village. To be honest, being deified like this, Susu felt a lot of pressure. What's the matter?
Tell me.
King Kong was in high spirits because of good things happening. He walked very fast and almost floated in front of Susu. His dark face was full of smiles. Before Susu could speak, he took the initiative to shout, "Susu, you are about to give birth. Why don't you learn from our Dr. Zhuo?" Our Dr. Zhuo was also pregnant. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she would lie down instead of sitting, and would sit instead of standing. "You're not like me who runs around every day. Yibapi, why don't you wake up quickly?" Otherwise, you will die with such a big belly.
You, me.
Su rolled her eyes in anger and glared at King Kong. Was she in the way of him? Then she said, I won't argue with you. I have something to tell you. The baby in Dr. Zhuo's belly needs to be preserved. The clinic doesn't have enough oxygen tanks and all the medicines to preserve the baby. Go ask what medicines are needed and bring people to find them. Also, bring back the baby incubator and other things. In an instant, the silly smile on King Kong's face gradually disappeared with Su's words. He was stunned for a long time, as if he didn't quite understand what Su meant. He asked, Dr. Zhuo, does the baby in your belly need to be preserved? Yes, that's right. Go and ask her what she needs now to keep the baby, and then go and bring people to get everything she wants back. Sumu had a wooden face. After he finished speaking in a straightforward manner, he supported his waist and walked away, leaving King Kong standing there alone, feeling as if he had fallen into an icy cave under the scorching sun. She still chose to tell King Kong the truth, not because she disregarded the safety of the entire Bafang village, nor did she think she was a saint, nor did she disregard the safety of her unborn little AI, nor did she think that she could ensure the safety of the entire Bafang village by herself. But when Su saw King Kong's excited look, she couldn't help but say it. Perhaps after thinking about it, it could only be attributed to one thing. Su didn't want to owe Zhuo and King Kong such a big favor. It was terrible to owe favors to others. If she couldn't pay it back, Xiao AI would have to pay it back. In the clinic, on the sky-blue plastic sofa, Junjiu brought a thin blanket and put it under Zhuo back and buttocks. Zhuo face was pale. After Junjiu finished tossing and turning, he complained to her. You shouldn't have told Su about this. You've been together for so long, and you know her personality. Even the day before giving birth, she was thinking about doing something. What if she can't stay idle and runs out to find medicine and an incubator for me? No, that's impossible. She's about to give birth. She won't do anything so risky. She doesn't seem like someone who would be so reckless. After hearing what Zhuo said, Junjiu felt a little regretful. In fact, she saw that Zhuo was also very conflicted. Since she had already told King Kong about this, she had been hesitating whether to keep the fetus. As a result, she felt very miserable alone. The bleeding was flowing every day, and Junjiu couldn't help it. When Su asked, she told him, that's because you don't understand her. She's actually a very soft-hearted person. She can't go out and find the medicine and the incubator by herself, but she can instruct others to do it. Zhuo had a look of powerlessness on her face. She tilted her head and frowned tightly. Just now, she saw Su walking out thoughtfully, and she definitely didn't look like someone who would just leave the matter alone. But now there were not many military forces left in Bafang village. If they went out to find medicine and incubators for her, everyone in the village would be in danger. Just as she was thinking, Zhuo was stunned, and then she saw the burly body of King Kong standing outside the door without knowing when. She straightened her neck, looked at King Kong, and opened his mouth, wanting to ask him what he had heard. Then, looking at the expression of pain, suppression, shock, and anger on King Kong's face, she suddenly realized that King Kong knew everything. Is what Su said true? King Kong walked in step by step. His burly figure in camouflage uniform walked slowly from the golden sunlight into the rather shady clinic. He asked Zhuo, do you really need to preserve your pregnancy? Then, without waiting for Zhuo to speak, King Kong had already walked in front of Zhuo, staring at Zhuo's belly with eyes wide open, and suddenly he knelt on his knees and collapsed in front of Zhuo. You. Zhuo was somewhat helpless. Looking at King Kong's appearance that seemed to be greatly shocked, he thought for a moment, sighed, and said, in fact, I might as well hold on and not tell you about this. She felt a little regretful after listening to Su's words. It happened that she was having a prenatal checkup and was caught by King Kong, who broke in. So, Zhuo couldn't control herself for a moment. When King Kong asked her questions full of suspicion, she told King Kong about her pregnancy. King Kong was so happy. Seeing King Kong's overjoyed look, Zhuo Shijia felt a pang in his heart. Now, comparing it with King Kong's shocked and lifeless look, Zhuo Shijia's heart began to ache again. Perhaps if she had chosen to tell King Kong the truth at the beginning, King Kong wouldn't be in such a desperate look now that he knows the baby needs to be preserved, right? I should know. King Kong lowered his head and placed his hands on both sides of Zhuo Shijia. The dull pain in his heart could not be described in words. He looked up. He was a big man who had shed blood and sweat but never cried for anything. But this time his eyes were red. He looked up at Zhuo Shijia and asked in a hoarse voice, "How serious is the situation? If we save it at all costs, how long can it last? I want to hear the truth." Seeing Zhuo Shijia pursed his lips and said nothing, King Kong moved his fingers, and there was a little pleading in his eyes. So Zhuo Shijia sighed and said, "If there is enough medicine, 7 months. That requires that all the drugs to preserve the pregnancy are in sufficient supply. If Zhuo Shijia lies in bed motionless for 7 months, there is a 70% chance that the baby in her belly can be preserved for 7 months. However, a 7-month-old fetus is considered premature. In an environment like the end of the world, the chances of a premature baby surviving are very low." This was also the most important reason why Zhuo Shijia hesitated at the beginning whether to keep it. Now that King Kong is here, Zhuo Shijia cannot choose to have an abortion. Then there are the problems of the scarcity of various pregnancy-preserving drugs and the practical problems of the child needing to be put in an incubator after it is born. Of course, if the situation outside Bafang village was not so urgent, so many people suddenly left Bafang village, and Su Su was about to give birth, these problems of lack of medicine and equipment would be easy to solve. King Kong could just take his brothers back to the safe zone, and everything would be settled. However, various factors are now intertwined, and the baby in Zhuo Shijia's belly is stuck in such an awkward situation. She wants to keep it, but she has no conditions to do so. I'll take someone to find medicine right away." King Kong still had his head down, his fists clenched tightly. He seemed to have just floated up to the clouds, and now he fell directly from the clouds into the abyss. His mood was going up and down, making him feel very uncomfortable. Then he heard Zhuo Shijia speaking calmly over his head, "So you pulled everyone out, leaving behind Su Su, a pregnant woman about to give birth, and all the people in the village? If something happened to Su Su, would you be worthy of your brother who is still evolving? But he is my child." Unable to understand Zhuo Shijia's calmness, King Kong suddenly raised his head and stared at Zhuo Shijia. He clenched his fists tightly and shook his head slowly at Zhuo Shijia in disbelief. If Yi Ba Pai's child encountered such a thing, he would not sit idly by. Yes, but his little love has not encountered such a thing as our child. Zhuo Shijia closed her eyes and no longer looked at King Kong. She understood many things, and she believed that King Kong would understand. This was the current situation. Even if they paid the price of destroying the entire Bafang village, their child could only be barely saved. Even if he was barely saved, he would be born prematurely, and if he was born prematurely, he might not survive. The price is too high, too high. She looked coldly at King Kong, who was in a dilemma. King Kong stared at her blankly, then lowered his head, bent his body, stood up with a lonely look, and slowly turned around and walked away step by step. When Zhuo Shijia saw his back, she felt so helpless, so lonely, and very sad. She knew that it was not that he was incapable of finding her pregnancy-preserving medicine, nor was it that he was incapable of protecting his premature child. It was precisely because he had the ability but could not do it at this time that he seemed so sad. The world is so helpless. Everything is just not in my hands. Early the next morning, Su Su had not slept well the whole night. She lay beside Yu, who was as charred as charcoal. In the dim light, she tilted her head to look at the man beside her, wondering what kind of panic situation she would face when she went out in a while. How many of the 18 Special Forces soldiers with superpowers will be taken away by King Kong? Maybe all of them will be taken away. After all, the medical level in Xiangqing is well developed, right? Now Xiangqing is full of maggots and zombies. King Kong wants to find medicine for Zhuo Shijia, so naturally he has to bring more people. Then how many armed forces are left in Bafang village? It is estimated that there are not many left. The remaining few superpowers are at the first and second levels. These two levels can only do ordinary construction at most. If they really want to kill maggots and zombies, they still need to practice. Then came her own problem. It was already more than 8 months, and the false contractions were becoming more frequent day by day. She still wanted to try her best to hold on until full-term delivery. So, no matter what happened, Su encouraged herself. She must not panic, absolutely not panic. Things have developed to this point. She should be more selfish. She should pick up the cold-bloodedness of her previous life. At the critical moment, when the crisis comes and she can't handle it anymore, she will leave without taking any survivors except her parents, including this burden. Yiyu. Yes, it should be like this. At most, all the people in the village will be locked up in the vault. The vault is a good place. Yiyu once took Su to see it. There are 8 layers of metal walls inside. Maggots and zombies can never get in. If she can't defend Bafang village anymore, she will lock everyone in. After she gives birth, she will have enough energy to come back and release the survivors in the vault. Then it will be time to kill those maggots and zombies. The most important thing now is to stock up some supplies in the vault to prevent the elderly and children from starving to death in the vault. Having made such arrangements for herself, Su was no longer afraid of the coming and going of those special forces soldiers with superpowers. She was in a good mood and propped herself up to sit up. She felt as if her waist was about to break, so she sat on the edge of the bed to relax, then went to wash her mouth with her big belly. When she came downstairs, she saw hot porridge and steamed buns on the table in the main hall. Su ate while listening to the women's self-improvement team led by Li Xiuyu outside the yard, who were shouting 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 and at ease. Stand at attention. Stand still with great momentum. Su smiled, and after finishing the porridge and the steamed buns, she walked out with her back supported and saw King Kong leading 2 men, walking past her with weapons in hand.
Huh?
Why didn't King Kong take anyone to find the medicine to preserve the pregnancy? Su looked at King Kong in surprise, then raised her head to look at the roof of Bafang village. The Special Forces soldiers were standing on the roof in 2s and 3s, holding guns in their hands. Some were chatting, some were smoking, and some were walking back and forth. It seems like no one leaves the village? What happened to these people? Su was a little confused and couldn't help but called out, King Kong? King Kong walked over with a stern face. He was in a bad mood and very depressed. Looking at Su, he was no longer as playful as before. He walked up to Su and asked with a sour face, What?
Say it.
You didn't bring anyone to find the pregnancy-preserving medicine? Speaking of the words pregnancy-preserving medicine, King Kong's face suddenly became extremely ugly. He moved his lips and uttered 2 words, no. Then he turned and walked away. After walking 2 steps, King Kong stopped, turned around, stared at Su, and said word by word, Su, you must ensure that the baby in your belly is safe and sound and comes into this world healthy. You must. Otherwise, I will not let you go because that was obtained in exchange for his and Zhua Shizha's child.
I sigh.
Watching King Kong walk away without looking back, Su opened her mouth, not knowing what to say. She looked down at her big belly, sighed, reached out, and touched her belly. For the first time, she discovered that Xiao AI, before she was even born, was already much luckier than other babies. At least Xiao AI was now in her belly, stable and secure. There was no need to worry about whether the fetus could be saved. Seeing that Su was a little depressed again, the scholar walked by her side, carefully observed the melancholy expression on Su's face, and advised, Su, everyone has their own destiny, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. King Kong is a man. Any man would be in a bad mood if he encountered such a thing, so his words would inevitably be a little harsh. Don't take it to heart. No, I don't blame him. She shook her head and frowned, not knowing how to tell the scholar. Su was actually not good at speaking. Normal words would often take on a different meaning when spoken from her mouth, so she did not explain much. After saying goodbye to the scholar, She turned around and went back to the yard. After a while, before Su Su recovered from King Kong's determination not to find the pregnancy-preserving medicine, she saw Mei Xingnan walking in with graceful steps and twisting her hips. She was wearing a white shirt and blue jeans, an outfit that could not conceal her unparalleled beauty. Su Su was sitting on a small bench in the yard. Next to the bench was a small coffee table. On the coffee table was a large watermelon that had been cut by Su's mother. It was said that this watermelon was produced by the joint efforts of 3 disabled with type ability users. It took them half a month to produce such a large watermelon, which was not easy. She glanced at Mei Xingnan, pointed to a small stool not far away, and said, "You can take a stool and sit on it. I'm too lazy to move." "TSK, SK," Mei Xingnan glanced at Su Su's bloated body with disdain. She didn't know whether it was because Su Su's waist was too round or the stool was too small. Anyway, Mei Xingnan couldn't see the stool under Su Su's buttocks. She turned around, moved a stool like a familiar person, sat down next to the coffee table, picked up a slice of cut melon, opened her mouth, took a bite without any image and praised, "So sweet." Well, there will be no shortage of sweet melons like this in the future. Seeing Mei Xingnan eating with gusto, Su Su responded to her indifferently, and then she heard Mei Xingnan say, while eating melon, "You, don't be so stern. Life is already tense. When you have such a stern face, everyone in the village will be nervous from the bottom of their hearts, afraid that we can still hold on for now. Haven't you seen the mutant bushes in the trenches become more and more lush? Even if a wave of zombies comes, those bushes can digest them all." "That's good." Mei Xingnan nodded, put the watermelon peel in her hand on the coffee table, and took out a soft handkerchief from her trouser pocket. While wiping her hands, she said to Su Su, "Hey, Su Su, are you interested in listening to gossip?" Su Su raised her eyebrows and glanced at Mei Xingnan. She knew that Mei Xingnan would not come to her for no reason. Gossip? Although it was gossip, what Mei Xingnan wanted to say must have a great relationship with Su Su and Bafang village. Mei Xingnan pretended to be mysterious for a while, then she twisted her body, leaned her waist, and leaned lazily on the coffee table and said to Su Su, "Do you know where Feng Shui came from? It's a big deal, I don't know the details." "Then, do you know Spring City?" "I know that all the survivors outside are heading to Spring City now. Do they think Chunqing is safe? In fact, Chunqing is also in fierce competition. Feng Shui has a father named Feng Yud, who is said to be very powerful before the end of the world. He also has an uncle named Feng Yumao, who is Chu Xian's immediate superior. It is said that he was a big tiger in the army before the end of the world. Now Feng Yumao is in Chunqing. The fact that Chunqing can develop so well now is not unrelated to Feng Yumao." Mei Xingnan observed Su Su's reaction while she was talking. It seemed that Su Su was very interested in what she said, so she continued, "Don't worry about the weapons in the military trucks of you and Chu Xian. They are on the way. But I guess Feng Shui won't give them to you so easily. If for no other reason, Feng Yumao wants to be the top leader in Chunqing now, and he is short of supplies to win people's hearts. Our Bafang village has developed well, and Feng Shui has made a very detailed investigation during this period. I think he wants to cooperate with us and buy our supplies." "How much supplies do we have here?" Su Su yawned and thought for a moment. Actually, when all was said and done, Bafang village had quite a lot of food supplies. Excluding the chickens, everyone in Bafang village now grew vegetables. Even the vegetables that grew according to the laws of nature had reached the point where they could never be eaten up. If it develops further in the future, it will also be able to supply the material needs of Chunqing. But there was no one in Bafang village, and now it was surrounded by maggots and was in danger all the time. It was still too early for Mei Xingnan to tell her what she had said. So Feng Shui is still observing. Mei Xingnan smiled with her red lips pursed. She tilted her head to reveal her snow-white neck. She looked at her fingernails nonchalantly and said to Su Su, "Let me tell you another piece of gossip. Do you know what the relationship between Qiao Si and Feng Shui is?" "What is it?" Qiao Si's mother was the mistress of Feng Shui's father Feng Yud. It was said that they were in true love, but they never married. Later, Qiao Si's mother died. Feng Yud, thinking of his relationship with his mistress, took Qiao Si back and raised her as his adopted daughter. Qiao Si is Feng Yud's adopted daughter. Aren't she and Feng Shui nominally siblings?
Su Su is still a bit gossipy.
She looked at Mei Shengnan and asked, then how did they have a child? Haha, this is exactly what Qiao Si does. Mei Shengnan is Mei Shengnan, so she simply had a romantic dinner with Feng Shui, and then she found out everything about Feng Shui. She continued, as for Qiao Si, it is said that she has been secretly in love with Feng Shui since she was a child, but Feng Shui knows his limits when it comes to playing with women. He obviously cannot touch someone like Qiao Si, so he told her very clearly a long time ago. But Qiao Si was ignorant and insisted on fantasizing about living together with Feng Shui. So, she got drunk, took drugs, and took the initiative to send herself to Feng Shui's bed. That's it. Mei Shengnan looked at Su Su with an expression that said, "You understand now, don't you?" And said with a smile, "Finally, I have another good news for you. Qiao Si is coming back." What? Su Su opened her eyes and changed her previous weak look. Looking at Mei Shengnan, who was full of interest, she couldn't help but ask, "Is this good news?" "Of course, you have a fight to watch. How is that not good news?" "Who's fighting with whom? You and Qiao Si?" As soon as the question was asked, Mei Shengnan smiled. She stood up nonchalantly, walked in front of Su Su, flicked the dust off the corner of her clothes, and said, "Now Feng Shui and I are having a good chat. He is quite interested in me, and I am quite interested in him too. If Qiao Si comes back, will he fight me to the death? So, I'm reporting this to you first. If the war spreads accidentally and implicates innocent people, I'll be sorry first." "Okay, Maisie, what do you want me to do for you?" Originally, Su Su didn't want to get involved in this matter, but when she saw Mei Shengnan's aggressive attitude, like a female general about to enter the battlefield, Su Su felt that this was Mei Shengnan's main battlefield. As a friend, she and Mei Shengnan could barely be considered friends now, right? Shouldn't she support Mei Shengnan a little?
Don't do anything.
You can't do anything. Mei Shengnan looked at Su Su's big belly and seemed to be very restless to help her, so she waved her hand in disdain, and then she heard Su Su laugh. "You don't need my help, and that's fine. But when these people left, I told them that it's easy for them to leave, but when they come back, Bafang village won't accept any of them, no matter what." Speaking of why Qiao Si and the others came back, it was because Feng Shui once said that he would send someone to look for Qiao Si. Feng Shui's decision to look for Qiao Si was their own business, and Su Su had no right to interfere. However, she had asked Brother Pai to leave his fingerprints as a gesture. If these people came back in the future, Bafang village would not accept them. Later, Feng Shui arrived and sent people all the way to Chunqing to look for them, only to discover that the group of people who had followed Qiao Si were now awkwardly trapped on the edge of the zombie tide. They thought that by leaving the maggot tide in Bafang village and going north, they could reach Chunqing. As a result, the scope of the zombie tide became larger and larger, and they happened to be caught up with it. Su Su thought that after Feng Shui found Qiao Si, he would send her to Chunqing, but he actually let her come back? So when Feng Shui's people were sent there, those who originally had great ambitions to go to Chunqing also came back with Qiao Si. On this point, Su Su thought it was necessary to clarify her position with Feng Shui. If she said she would not accept people who left Bafang village, then she would not accept them. This had nothing to do with Mei Shengnan but with Bafang village. In Bafang village, Su Su, could she leave as she pleased or stay as she pleased?
Mei Shengnan smiled.
The little grudges between Su Su and the group of people who left at the beginning had nothing to do with Mei Shengnan. She only cared about what happened after Qiao Si entered Bafang village. If Qiao Si didn't even have the ability to enter Bafang village, then it would be too unchallenging. As soon as Mei Shengnan left, Su Su reiterated her meaning to Brother Pai and repeated Mei Shengnan's words. Brother Pai's face was also gloomy. He nodded, stood in front of Su Su, and cursed. Those people left with Qiao Si last time. How dare they come back with him this time? This is not a refuge. You can come and go as you please. If we don't accept you, we won't accept anyone. That's what I mean. Today, a group of people came and left when they saw that Bafang village was dangerous. Tomorrow, the outside world was more dangerous than Bafang village, so they came back. What do they think Bafang village is? Su nodded, took a piece of watermelon and gave it to Brother Pai, and said, "Tell Feng Shui about this and ask him to arrange a new place for Qiao Si. Otherwise, bring his son, and follow Qiao Si back to Chunqing. Our Bafang village is a remote place, so we won't keep this young master. Will Mei Sheng and be willing?" Brother Pai hesitated a little, took the watermelon given by Su, opened his mouth and took a bite, and continued, "I think Mei Shengnan didn't find out Feng Shui's ancestors clearly, and she seemed to be dissatisfied. Feng Shui is leaving. Mei Shengnan will not follow him, right? Hapo village is too small for Maisie. Maybe. Su thinks that Mei Shengnan will follow Feng Shui. To be honest, this Bafang village is really too monotonous, and the personnel structure is not complex enough. It is not suitable for someone like Mei Shengnan. Her stage is not in Bafang village. In Bafang village, Mei Shengnan has no place to use her talents at all. So Su thinks that if Mei Shengnan wants to leave, she can understand it. So, there is still a long way to go. Su looked into the distance. Although she was reluctant to leave Mei Shengnan, everyone has different aspirations. She could not live the kind of dissolute life that Mei Shengnan lived, and Mei Shengnan could not live the plain life of a peasant woman enjoying the sweetness of mountain spring water like her. So, even though Su was reluctant to leave Mei Shengnan, she still decided to respect Mei Shengnan's personal wishes. Unexpectedly, when Brother Pai returned and found Feng Shui and told him that he refused to let Qiao Si come back, Feng Shui did not say to leave, nor did he tell Qiao Si not to come back. Instead, he personally came to Su's house and gave her 2 large boxes of crystal cores and said very politely, "It is said that Chunqing will soon face a wave of zombie attacks. I don't care about the rest of the people, but Su, can you please give me a favor and take Qiao Si and my people in so that we can avoid this disaster for the time being? People say that when you go out, you rely on friends. I will make friends with you, and you will do me a favor. One day, I will repay you with gratitude." Looking at the 2 boxes of crystal cores in the yard, Su frowned and said nothing. She was a little angry. She had clearly said before that those who left Bafang village would not be allowed to come back, but Feng Shui insisted on letting Qiao Si come back and gave her 2 boxes of crystal cores. This was a bribe. However, Su thought about it and looked at Feng Shui and suddenly asked, "Did you send a plane to find Qiao Si?" "Yes, that's right." Feng Shui frowned slightly, feeling a little troubled about this matter. What bothered him was not Su's current attitude, but that Qiao Si was too troublesome. Just because of Qiao Si's willfulness, he had to send a plane to find someone, and send a crystal core to Su. In order to bring Qiao Si back, he sent many people to clean up the zombies, and several psychics died on the way. Ha. Feng Shui stood in front of Su, squinting his peach blossom eyes, and smiled at Su. Su, you are really a wonderful person. You said that there are things that are useless in the whole world, but how come they are scarce here? This is not a problem at all. I can do it, and I can even give you more things. Chunqing does have more abundant supplies than Bafang village. After all, Chunqing was a big city before the end of the world, and pregnancy-preserving medicine is not a rare medicine. You can just grab a handful of it, and they are all piled up in the trading house to gather dust. It seems that a batch of them was destroyed some time ago, because the inventory was insufficient. If they were not destroyed, they would seriously take up inventory space. There are also those baby incubators, and the like. Not to mention the baby incubators, all kinds of baby products are also piled up like garbage in the garbage dump of Chunqing. It's the end of the world, there are few pregnant women and babies. Why keep those things? It would be better for Feng Shui to do Su a favor and give it all to her. After he agreed, a plane flew from Chunqing to Bafang village that night. Several people got off the plane, carrying boxes of pregnancy-preserving drugs wrapped in wooden strips, and delivered them all to the clinic in Bafang village. There were so many pregnancy-preserving drugs that they almost frightened Zhuo Shijia and King Kong. Before Zhuo and King Kong could ask Su what was going on the next day, incubators and other medical equipment suitable for babies were also transported in by several planes. Those various medical equipment were crowded in front of the clinic, making people look like they could open a children's hospital at a glance. In addition, there are many baby products, piles of children's clothes for all seasons, boxes of unopened baby milk powder and complementary foods, a variety of toys, various watercolor pens, crayons, gouache, drawing paper, and plasticine, as well as a large number of exercise books, pencils, erasers, and small school bags. Then, a convoy, escorting Qiao Si, appeared on the path in front of Bafang village. The psychics led the way and continuously cast their skills. In the thin layer of maggots and the maggot tide, they opened a road leading to Bafang village. Brother Pai had been waiting on the watchtower. He was seen carrying a stool and sitting next to the searchlight. He was wearing a tattered straw hat on his head and holding a battery-powered loudspeaker in his hand. He shouted to the convoy that was slowly moving forward in front of him. The people whose names are called out below can enter the village with the special approval of the village chief. The people whose names are not called out, please leave on your own initiative. I will repeat it again. The people whose names are called out below can enter the village with the special approval of the village chief. The people whose names are not called out, please leave on your own initiative. The names below are called out. Qiao Si, Gobatian list in Brother Pai's hand was given by Feng Shi. It included not only the 8 superpower bodyguards of Qiao Si and Gobatian, but also the many people who went out to clean up the zombies and support Qiao Si. So when Brother Pai read out the names one by one, there were actually dozens of people on the list. But the convoy continued to move forward steadily, and those in the convoy whose names were not called did not stop moving forward because of Pigo's broadcast. So when the convoy arrived at the entrance of Bafang village, they saw that the maggots outside were increasing in number, but Bafang village had no intention of opening the gates, so the car at the front of the convoy finally stopped. Because of the stimulation of the living people, a lot of maggots emerged from the soil in the distance and swarmed towards the convoy. The maggots that had originally moved towards Bafang village now turned around and attacked the convoy. The gate at the entrance of the village was slow to open, and everyone became a little panicked. Open the door, idiot. There are zombies coming from behind. That's right, Brother Pai. Don't you recognize us? I'm Lu Chuanfeng, Brother Pai. Open the door for us quickly. There are zombies in the back. Yeah, the zombies outside are so scary, scarier than maggots. Brother Pai, open the door quickly. The people whose names are called out below can enter the village with the special approval of the village chief. Those whose names are not called out, please leave voluntarily. The following names are called out. Qiao Si, Gobatian. Brother Pai ignored the acquaintances outside and continued reading on his loudspeaker. At this moment, Brother Pai had only one thought in his mind, that it would be great if there was a recording so that he wouldn't have to read the list over and over again, and it seemed like those people outside didn't understand. Captain Lu, it looks like the Bafang village is planning to turn against us and lock us out. In the convoy, a man named Lu Ren found Lu Chuanfeng. Lu Chuanfeng was the person with the highest level of supernatural power among those who left Bafang village. He currently had the 3rd level fire supernatural power, so he deservedly became their leader. Sitting in the driver's seat of the car was Lu Chuanfeng, who looked to be in his 30s, with ordinary looks and short middle-parted hair. He looked gloomily at the front of the car, where there were 2 tall watchtowers. Brother Pai was sitting on one of the towers, holding a loudspeaker and reading a list. On the list, those of them who had left Bafang village were not included. What should we do? Brother Lu, what should we do? Lian Xin, who was only wearing a t-shirt but from the waist down, climbed up from the back seat of the car. Her face was covered in dirt and her thighs were covered in bruises. She leaned on the back of Lu Chuanfeng's car seat and asked pitifully, "Will we die here?" Lu Chuanfeng was sitting in the driver's seat. He turned around and slapped Lian Xin, who was leaning on the back of his seat, away. The gate of Bafang village was closed, and the situation outside was not even 1/3 as stable as that inside Bafang village. Lu Chuanfeng was feeling extremely annoyed at the moment. So it's no wonder that he pushed Lian Xin. For a woman like Lian Xin, He could beat her or scold her as he wanted, or even kill her. Lianxin, with her lower body in the back seat, didn't dare to say another word. She was afraid that she would anger this man and be thrown out to feed the maggots. Outside the car, a man saw this, chuckled a few times, opened the door of Lu Chuanfeng's rear car, got in, grabbed Lianxin, and started doing dirty things in the car. What a coward. Lu Ren, who was outside the car window, glanced at the tightly closed gate of Bafang Village and said angrily, "Captain Lu, after looking around, I think Bafang Village is the best. Why don't we go inside Bafang Village?" "Hush, that's all later." Lu Chuanfeng interrupted the nonsense of his subordinates outside the car window. Although he was also tempted, he was still a calm man. His subordinates were trying to seize Bafang Village before they even entered the gate. There were 18 special soldiers with supernatural powers guarding Bafang Village, so how could it be so easy to seize it? However, life in Bafang Village is really good. In the past, these people had little knowledge and thought that life in Bafang Village was too dull and boring, and that people with special abilities would be treated very well outside. As a result, there is no harm without comparison. After only 1 or 2 days away, they regretted their decision and decided that it would be safer and more prosperous to stay in Bafang Village. It's not so easy to get along in the outside world. There are maggots everywhere, and after the maggots, there are zombies. That's right. They have been in Bafang Village for a long time and almost forgot that there are creatures like zombies in the outside world. As a result, they were surrounded by zombies. With a few low-level psychics and a lot of ordinary survivors, how could they resist the tide of zombies? So they clung to Qiao Xi's thighs. When Qiao Xi's people came to rescue Qiao Xi, they followed Qiao Xi out. Qiao Xi wanted to go back to Bafang Village, so they had to go back to Bafang Village. Originally, when Bafang Village was besieged by maggots, they chose to leave, and they also expected that Su Su would be angry. If there were no zombies blocking their way, they certainly would not have the audacity to return to Bafang Village. But now the road to Chuncheng is blocked by zombies, they have no way to go, so they can only return to Bafang Village. Fortunately, Su Su is a woman with a soft heart and will not stand by and watch someone die. Otherwise, a woman like Qiao Xi, who is as insignificant as a daughter, would not be allowed in. Having decided to adopt a conciliatory policy towards Su Su, Lu Chuanfeng's subordinates notified the rest of the people. Led by a few ordinary survivors, a group of people got out of the car, knelt on the stone bridge at the gate of Bafang Village, and began to wail for Brother Pai to open the door and let them in. "Brother Pai, we have been together for so long after all. We have friendship even if we don't have family ties. Please let us in." "Su Su, it was our fault to leave Bafang Village. We should not be so stingy, right? The zombies are coming soon, so please let us in. Please." "Su Su, I kowtow to you and admit my mistake. Please let me in. I am an ordinary person, and I will be eaten by zombies sooner or later. At first, we were afraid that Bafang Village could not be defended, so we wanted to escape when faced with a crisis. This is human nature. Su Su, please be magnanimous and don't bother with ordinary people like us. Su Su, please." Various wailing sounds rang out amid the sound of supernatural special effects. Qiao Xi, who was sitting in the car, couldn't bear it. She thought for a moment, opened the car window, and said to Go Batian, who was guarding outside the car, "These people haven't done anything wrong. Go talk to Su Su and let them in. They are so pitiful. Isn't it said that saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda?"
Su Su is so cruel.
This. Go Batian was throwing wooden thorns into the maggot tide. Hearing what Qiao Xi said, he turned his head to look at Qiao Xi in embarrassment, pursed his lips, and said nothing. He actually wanted to say that Qiao Xi himself was admitted through special approval by young Master Fong, who spent a lot of money and asked Su Su to use the back door. As a result, now Qiao Xi still wants to speak for those who are determined to leave Bafang Village. Isn't it a bit too much? To be honest, if Go Batian had not accepted the job of the eldest son of the Fong family, he would have been too embarrassed to return to Bafang Village. Thinking back to when he went to find Su Su and told her that they were going to leave, Su Su had already advised them once, saying that the tide of corpses was heading towards Chunqing. As a result, Ge Batian thought that Su Su wanted to keep them so that they could grow vegetables for Bafong village, so he did not listen to Su Su's advice. After I went out, I found out that what Su Su said was true. On the watchtower, Brother Pai was still shouting with a megaphone. His throat was about to smoke. Looking back, he saw that the survivors who had left Bafong village had not left, but had knelt in front of the gate of Bafong village. This made Brother Pai very angry. He threw the megaphone away and stopped shouting. When he hurried down the watchtower, he saw Su Su walking towards him with a bulging belly on the steps. He complained to Su Su, "Those people outside don't understand what we're saying and are kneeling at the door. What should we do?" "Kneel down. What else can I do?"
Susurrad lightly.
Even standing inside the mud wall of Bafong village, she could hear the wailing outside. The sound was so loud that she didn't even need to look to guess what the people outside were like. So she didn't want to look and just said to Brother Pai, "Open a small door, have people guarding the door with weapons, read out a name, and let that person in. Remember, no one without a name is allowed in." What's the point of being humble enough? How can a person with good hands and feet not get a bite to eat? Just like what they thought at the beginning, being a superpower means being superior to ordinary people in the outside world. This is absolutely true. As long as they can find a way to get themselves into a larger human gathering place, a safe zone, or even a base, superpowers will definitely have many privileges. So, if you want to leave, don't come back. Even if you come back, Su Su won't accept you. Then why was Qiao Si able to come in? Because Qiao Si's backstage gave Zhuoshijia the pregnancy-preserving medicine, which was exchanged for a little life. Su Su's attitude was very firm, and Brother Pai carried out Su Su's orders thoroughly. He turned around immediately, not caring whether his throat was smoking or not, and led a few gangsters to open the small door and read out the list. He originally wanted to find a few Special Forces soldiers with special powers to support him, but Li Xiaoyu brought a team of female soldiers, each of them holding cold weapons, marching in standard steps, and took the initiative to guard both sides of the gate. Speaking of the women's self-improvement team established by Li Xiaoyu, the cold weapons in their hands are of little use. If they fight with outsiders, they will not be able to deal with the superpowers. However, these cold weapons are made by a fortune teller and are completely imitated from special equipment, which is enough to threaten the survivors. The gate of Bafong village, which looks extremely heavy, is also cleverly designed with a lot of hidden weapons. There is only a small door for one person to enter and exit, and such a configuration still exists. As soon as the small door was opened, the survivors kneeling on the ground stood up in a hurry and rushed to the small door. Brother Pai quickly ordered people to close the small door. He did not care how many people outside were cursing and opened another secret compartment on the small door. He raised his loudspeaker again and shouted, Qiao Si, your name is called. Do you want to come in? I will call it 3 times. If you don't come in, it means you automatically give up the quota to enter Bafong village." Qiao Si, who was originally sitting in the car, feeling a little sad for these poor people kneeling on the ground, quickly opened the door and got out when she heard it. Immediately, a bodyguard with superpowers cleared the way for her, pushed aside several survivors, and sent Qiao Si to the front of the small door. Su Su, you will be punished for doing this. God is watching what we do. Su Su, you are such a snob. When I become rich, I will never let you go. Please, Su Su, open the door and let us in. I want to live. I really don't want to die. There were curses, begging, all kinds of voices came out one after another. Qiao Si was helpless and compassionate, but she was just a little woman. Apart from moral condemnation, she had no other way to deal with Su Su's cruelty. Even if Qiao Si did not cherish this opportunity to enter, she would be locked outside the door, so Qiao Si could only stand outside the small door with an apologetic heart, waiting for the small door to open and then she would walk in alone. Next came the 8 psychic bodyguards around Qiao Si. Their names were called out, and under the protection of the psychics sent by Feng Shui, they walked into the small door one by one. Finally, it was the people sent by Feng Shui who, after their names were called out, walked into the small door one by one. Seeing that there were fewer and fewer people outside, the psychics who were killing the maggots also walked into Bafeng village one by one. Lu Chuanfeng and others finally felt a little pressure from the maggots. Including Lu Chuanfeng, everyone started to get busy. Some were killing maggots, some were crying, some were howling, some were cursing. In short, they were busy. Speaking of killing maggots, it is actually quite easy to kill them, because although there are so many maggots densely packed together, the maggots outside Bafeng village cannot pile up very high, and their movement speed is not very fast, so you can just use a broom to sweep away a piece of open space. Inside the small door, Li Xiuyu tilted her head and looked at the survivors outside who were holding a broom and sweeping away the maggots around their feet. Her eyes lit up. She thought that during this period, the women's self-improvement team she led finally had some momentum. She was worried that there was no actual combat for the women's self-improvement team to practice. Sweeping the maggots with a broom was simple and uncomplicated, and not very dangerous. It was just the right way to do daily training. But this broom needs to be strengthened and improved. It would be best if there is a way to not only sweep away the maggots, but also kill and eliminate them when sweeping them. She stood in the small door, thinking about it, and then she thought of Su's mutant bushes. If there was any way to make the mutant bushes into a broom, she could sweep the maggots with the broom in her hand, and at the same time, the maggots could be digested and eaten by the broom. With this idea, Li Xiaoyu went to find a fortune teller and a scholar to find a solution. The fortune teller was a metal-based superpower, and the scholar always helped her a lot. The three of them thought together, and they could always come up with a good solution. When passing by Su's yard, Li Xiaoyu told Su this idea again.